Single Dad found a woman tied up in the woods. When he freed her, everything changed. The cry that echoed through the darkening forest that October evening would shatter Jack Merrick's quiet life forever. What he found bound to that ancient pine wasn't just a victim. It was the beginning of a nightmare that would test everything he believed about protection, sacrifice, and survival. This is their story. Stay with me until the very end, and comment below with your city so I can see how far this tale has traveled across the world. The shadows stretched long through the Cascade Mountains as Jack Merrick pressed his weathered hiking boot against the accelerator of his Forest Service truck. The dashboard clock glowed 6:47 p.m., 17 minutes past when he should have been home to Sophie. His daughter would be waiting at the neighbor's house, her small face pressed against Mrs. Henderson's kitchen window, watching for his headlights to pierce through the gathering dusk. "Daddy's coming, baby girl," Jack muttered to himself, his calloused hands gripping the steering wheel as the truck rumbled along the narrow fire access road. Pine needles scattered across the windshield, and somewhere in the distance, a crow called out its evening warning. He'd been a forest ranger for 12 years now, ever since he'd come home from his final deployment overseas to find his world had shifted on its axis. Being a single father hadn't been part of his plan, but life rarely consulted you about your plans. Sarah had left when Sophie was just 3 months old, unable to handle the isolation of mountain life, the long stretches of silence, the weight of motherhood she'd never wanted. The divorce papers had arrived on a Tuesday. He'd signed them on a Wednesday. By Thursday, he'd learned to change diapers with one hand while holding a bottle with the other. Now Sophie was 7, gap-toothed and wild-haired, with her mother's green eyes and his stubborn chin. She was his entire world, compressed into 52 pounds of endless questions and fierce hugs that smelled like strawberry shampoo and playground dust. Jack reached for his radio to call in his position when he heard it. At first, he thought it was an animal, a wounded elk, maybe, or a coyote caught in an illegal trap. The sound was thin, desperate, almost swallowed by the wind moving through the towering pines. He slowed the truck, killed the engine, and rolled down his window. Silence. Just the whisper of wind and the settling sounds of the forest preparing for night. Then he heard it again, faint, unmistakable. A human voice crying for help. "Jesus," Jack breathed, his heart rate immediately shifting into the controlled urgency he'd learned in the Rangers. He grabbed his emergency pack and flashlight, clicked on his radio. "Base? This is Ranger Merrick. I've got a possible civilian in distress approximately 2 miles up Fire Road 17. Investigating. Over." Static crackled. Then came dispatch, tired, familiar voice of Tom Brennan. "Copy that, Jack. Want me to send backup?" Jack paused, listening. The cry came again, weaker this time, female, terrified. "Negative. Probably just a lost hiker. I'll call it in once I assess. Over." He didn't wait for a response. Something in his gut, that same instinct that had kept him alive in Kandahar and Helmand, told him every second mattered. Jack plunged into the tree line, his flashlight beam cutting through the deepening shadows. The forest floor was soft with decades of pine needles, and the air smelled of sap and approaching rain. He moved quickly but carefully, his trained ears picking up the direction of the sound. "Hello," he called out. "Forest Service, keep making noise so I can find you." A sob answered him, raw and desperate. Closer now. Jack pushed through a dense stand of Douglas fir, their branches clawing at his ranger jacket. The beam of his flashlight swept left, then right. Then he froze. 20 feet ahead, barely visible in the failing light, a woman was bound to a massive ponderosa pine. Her wrists were tied above her head with what looked like climbing rope, her ankles secured to the base of the trunk. Her clothes were torn and dirty, her dark hair matted with leaves and what might have been blood. Her head hung forward, and for one terrible moment, Jack thought he was too late. Then she lifted her face toward his light, and he saw her eyes, wide, terrified, disbelieving that someone had actually come. "Oh, God," Jack whispered, already running toward her. "Oh, God, I've got you. You're okay. I've got you." "Please," she gasped, her voice cracked and raw. "Please, they might come back, please." "Shh, it's okay, it's okay." Jack dropped to his knees beside her, his hands already working at the knots binding her wrists. They were professional, tight, efficient, meant to hold. His jaw clenched as he pulled his multi-tool from his belt and flicked open the knife. "I'm Jack. I'm a ranger. You're safe now. Nobody's going to hurt you." She was shaking violently, her whole body trembling with shock and cold. The temperature was dropping fast. It would hit the low 40s tonight, maybe colder. In her condition, hypothermia would set in quickly. The rope was thick, resistant. Jack sawed at it steadily, years of field experience keeping his hands steady even as his mind raced. Who ties someone to a tree and leaves them? What kind of monster? The rope gave way with a snap. The woman's arms fell and she cried out in pain as blood rushed back into her cramped limbs. Jack caught her as she slumped forward. "Easy, easy," he murmured, already moving to cut the bindings at her ankles. "I know it hurts. The circulation's coming back. That's good. That means no permanent damage." "They said," her voice broke. "They said if I told anyone, they'd come back. They said they'd make it worse. They said, hey." Jack cupped her face gently, forcing her wild eyes to focus on his. "Look at me. Right here. Nobody is going to hurt you. Do you understand? I'm getting you out of here right now, and whoever did this is not going to touch you again." She searched his face for a long moment, this stranger who'd appeared out of the darkness like an answer to a prayer she'd stopped believing in. Then she nodded, just once, and something in her expression shifted from pure terror to desperate, fragile hope. Jack made quick work of the ankle bindings, then shrugged out of his jacket and wrapped it around her shoulders. She was smaller than he'd first thought, maybe 5'5", slender, but not frail. Mid-30s, he guessed. There was a bruise darkening her left cheekbone, and he could see rope burns on her wrist that made his stomach turn. "Can you walk?" he asked. "I think so. I don't know. I've been here since—" She stopped, her face crumpling. "What day is it?" Jack felt ice slide down his spine. "It's Tuesday, October 24th. Tuesday," she repeated, her voice hollow. It's been almost 2 days." 2 days, tied to a tree, in below freezing temperatures, without food or water. The fact that she was conscious at all was remarkable. The fact that she was coherent was a miracle. "Okay," Jack said, forcing his voice to stay calm and steady. "We're about 20 minutes from my truck. I'm going to help you walk, and if you can't make it, I'll carry you. My cabin is close, much closer than the hospital. I'll get you warm and safe, and then we'll figure out the rest, okay?" She nodded, but when she tried to stand, her legs buckled immediately. Jack caught her before she hit the ground. "All right, plan B," he said, and without waiting for permission, he scooped her into his arms. She was lighter than his pack, and carrying wounded soldiers had been part of his training. "Put your arms around my neck and hold on." She obeyed, her face pressing against his shoulder. He could feel her tears soaking through his shirt. "What's your name?" Jack asked as he started back toward the truck, moving as quickly as he dared in the dimming light. "Keep her talking. Keep her conscious. Standard field medicine." "Emily," she whispered. "Emily Graves." "Okay, Emily, I'm Jack Merrick. I've got a daughter named Sophie. She's 7, loves horses, and hates broccoli. I've been a ranger here for 12 years. I know every inch of these woods. You picked a good tree to get tied to because it's right in my patrol sector." A sound that might have been a laugh escaped her. "Lucky me." "Damn straight lucky you." Jack adjusted his grip as he navigated around a fallen log. "Can you tell me if you're hurt anywhere besides your wrists? Any sharp pain in your ribs or stomach?" "No, they tied me up. They didn't—" Her voice caught. "They said if I stayed quiet, they wouldn't hurt me worse." "You did good, Emily. You survived. That's all that matters right now." They reached the truck, and Jack carefully settled her in the passenger seat before jogging around to the driver's side. He cranked the heat to maximum and handed her a bottle of water from his emergency kit. "Sip it slowly," he instructed. "Your stomach's going to be sensitive." She took the bottle with shaking hands and raised it to her cracked lips. Jack started the engine and grabbed his radio. "Base, this is Merrick. I've located the civilian, female, mid-30s, suffering from exposure and dehydration. Victim of assault. She's conscious and stable. I'm transporting her to my location rather than attempting the drive to town. Conditions aren't safe for that long a trip in her condition. We'll need police and medical to respond to my cabin." Over. There was a pause. Then, copy that, Jack. I'll dispatch county sheriff and paramedics. ETA approximately 90 minutes given the road conditions. You need anything else? Jack glanced at Emily, who sat huddled in his jacket, the water bottle pressed to her chest like a lifeline. Negative. We're good. Out. The drive to his cabin took 15 minutes along roads that were more suggestion than actual paths. Jack kept one eye on Emily, monitoring for signs of shock. She'd stopped shaking as violently, and the color was slowly returning to her face. Almost there, he said gently. I've got a wood stove, hot food, clean clothes. My daughter's at the neighbor's house, so it'll be quiet. Your daughter, Emily repeated softly. You said she's 7? Yeah. Sophie, she's my whole world. It's just the two of us. Emily turned to look at him, really look at him, for the first time. Jack knew what she saw. A man in his late 30s, weathered and worn, with crow's feet from too much sun and a jaw that hadn't seen a razor in 3 days. Not handsome, exactly, but solid, reliable. The kind of face you'd want to see if you were lost in the wilderness. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you for finding me. If you hadn't come when you did— But I did come, Jack interrupted firmly, and you're safe now. That's the only thing that matters. His cabin appeared through the trees, a sturdy A-frame structure with solar panels on the roof and a stone chimney. Warm light glowed in the windows, left on by the automatic timer. It wasn't much, but it was home. It was safe. Jack helped Emily inside and settled her into the armchair closest to the wood stove. He stoked the fire until it roared, then disappeared into his bedroom and returned with a pile of clean clothes, sweatpants, a thermal shirt, thick socks. Bathroom's through there, he said, pointing. There's a lock on the door. Take as long as you need. I'll make some food. Emily stood on unsteady legs, clutching the clothes to her chest. At the bathroom door, she paused and looked back at him. Why are you being so kind? She asked, her voice small and confused. You don't know me. This could be. Jack met her eyes steadily. Because someone hurt you, and that's not okay. And because if Sophie were ever in trouble, I'd want someone to help her. That's all the reason I need. Tears spilled down Emily's cheeks, but she nodded and disappeared into the bathroom. Jack heard the lock click, and he released a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. He moved into the kitchen and started pulling out ingredients on autopilot. Soup, bread, cheese. Comfort food, easy to digest. He'd learned emergency field care in the Army, but he'd learned how to care for people in quieter ways from being Sophie's dad. Sometimes the best medicine was a warm meal and a safe place to rest. The shower ran for a long time. Jack didn't rush her. He made tomato soup, grilled cheese sandwiches, and heated water for tea. He set the small kitchen table with mismatched plates and napkins. Normal. Ordinary. The kind of evening meal he'd share with Sophie on 1,000 other nights. When Emily finally emerged, she looked different. Her hair was still damp but clean, pulled back in a loose ponytail. The bruise on her cheek stood out starkly against her pale skin, but her eyes were clearer. She'd rolled the sweatpants 3 times at the waist, and the thermal shirt hung loose on her frame. Feel better? Jack asked. I feel human again, she admitted. I didn't think I would, but I do. Good. Come eat. They sat at the small table, and Emily ate slowly, carefully, like someone remembering how food worked. Jack gave her space, sipping his coffee and pretending not to watch her too closely. I need to call my office, Emily said suddenly, her spoon clattering against the bowl. They'll be looking for me. They need to know. Where do you work? Jack asked gently. Emily hesitated, her fingers white-knuckled around her spoon. I can't tell you. Okay. You don't understand. If I tell you, you'll be in danger too. Emily. Jack leaned forward, his voice calm but firm. I'm not asking you to explain anything right now. The sheriff will be here in about an hour. You can tell him whatever you feel safe telling him. But right now, you need to eat and rest and let yourself be safe, okay? She stared at him for a long moment, then nodded and returned to her soup. They ate in companionable silence. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the windows and making the pines creak. The wood stove crackled and popped. It should have felt peaceful, but Jack couldn't shake the tension knotting between his shoulder blades. Something about Emily's fear went deeper than a random attack. The way she'd flinched when he mentioned calling anyone. The terror in her eyes when she said, "They'll come back." Who were they? And why had they left her to die in the woods? After dinner, Jack washed the dishes while Emily curled up in the armchair, a blanket wrapped around her shoulders. She stared into the fire, her expression distant and haunted. "Jack?" she said softly. "Yeah? Do you believe in justice?" The question caught him off guard. He dried his hands on a dish towel and came to sit on the couch near her chair. "I believe in doing what's right. Sometimes that's the same as justice. Sometimes it's not. What if doing what's right puts other people in danger? People you care about?" Jack thought of Sophie, her gap-toothed smile, her fierce hugs, the way she sang off-key in the shower. "I think we do the best we can and try to protect the people we love. But sometimes standing up to something wrong is the only way to keep those people safe in the long run." Emily turned to look at him, and in the firelight, he could see tears tracking down her face. "I thought I could stop them. I thought if I just collected enough evidence, if I could prove what they were doing, but they found out. They always find out." "Who, Emily? Who found out?" She shook her head violently. I can't tell you. If they know you know, they'll hurt you too. They'll hurt your daughter." Jack felt cold settle in his gut. "Are you saying whoever did this to you? They're still looking for you?" Before Emily could answer, headlights swept across the cabin windows. Jack was on his feet instantly, his hand instinctively going to the rifle mounted above the door. But then he heard the distinctive rumble of a police cruiser, and he forced himself to relax. "It's the sheriff," he told Emily. "You're okay." But Emily had gone rigid in her chair, her eyes fixed on the door with the same terror she'd had when he'd found her tied to that tree. "They could have gotten to them," she whispered. "The police. The hospital. Anyone could be working for them. Anyone could—" "Emily, look at me." Jack knelt in front of her chair, blocking her view of the door. "I know Sheriff Morrison personally. He's a good man. He's not going to hurt you, but if you don't want to talk to him, you don't have to. I can ask him to wait until you're ready. It's your choice." A knock sounded at the door. "Jack, it's Tom Morrison. I've got the county paramedic with me." Emily's hands were shaking again. Jack waited, letting her decide. Finally, she took a deep breath and nodded. Okay, but I'm not telling them everything. Not yet." "That's fine. Just tell them what you feel safe sharing." Jack opened the door to find Sheriff Tom Morrison, a bear of a man in his mid-50s, and Carla Santos, the county's only full-time paramedic. They'd both worked these mountains for decades, and their faces showed the concern of people who'd seen too much tragedy in remote places. "She's inside," Jack said quietly. "Her name's Emily Graves. I found her tied to a tree up on Fire Road 17. She's been out there at least 2 days, maybe longer. She's scared, Tom. Really scared." Tom's expression darkened. "Tied to a tree? Jesus Christ, this wasn't some random—" "No, it wasn't random, and I don't think whoever did it is done." The sheriff's hand moved instinctively to his service weapon. "You think they're still in the area?" "I think Emily thinks they are, and I think we should listen to her." They entered the cabin, and Carla immediately went to Emily's side, her professional demeanor softening into gentle concern. "Hey, sweetheart. I'm Carla. I'm just going to check you over, okay? Make sure nothing's seriously wrong. Is that all right?" Emily nodded, and Carla began her examination, checking vitals, looking at the rope burns, asking quiet questions about pain and mobility. Tom pulled Jack aside. "Tell me everything," the sheriff said. Jack recounted the discovery, the drive back, the fear in Emily's voice when she talked about them. Tom listened with the grim focus of a man who'd spent 30 years dealing with the worst humanity had to offer. "She say who did this?" Tom asked. "No, she's terrified to talk. Says if she tells us, we'll be in danger too. Says they could have people everywhere, even in law enforcement." Tom's jaw tightened. That kind of paranoia usually comes from one of two places. Either she's had a psychotic break or she's telling the truth and she's mixed up in something way over our heads. Jack glanced at Emily, who was answering Carla's questions in monosyllables while clutching the blanket like armor. "I don't think she's crazy, Tom. I think she's right to be scared. The sheriff rubbed his weathered face. All right, we'll take her statement here. Keep it low-key. I'll put out a bolo for suspicious vehicles in the area. But Jack, if this is what I think it is, if this is organized crime, or worse, we're going to need federal involvement. This isn't something we can handle with 3 deputies and a prayer. I know. Tom approached Emily carefully, settling his large frame into the chair across from her. Ms. Graves, I'm Sheriff Tom Morrison. I've known Jack here since he moved to these mountains. I want you to know that you're safe, and nothing you tell me leaves this room unless you want it to. Can you tell me what happened to you? Emily looked at Jack and he nodded encouragingly. She took a shaky breath. I was driving on Highway 20, heading east. It was Sunday afternoon. A car pulled up behind me, a black SUV with tinted windows. They followed me for miles. I tried to lose them, but she swallowed hard. They forced me off the road. 3 men. They wore masks. They dragged me out of my car and... Take your time, Tom said gently. They said they had a message for me, that I should have minded my own business, that if I kept digging, they'd do worse than leave me in the woods. Her voice broke. They said they'd make sure no one ever found my body. Carla placed a gentle hand on Emily's shoulder. Did they say what you were supposed to stop digging into? Emily's eyes filled with fresh tears. No, but I know. I know what they meant. What were you investigating, Ms. Graves? Tom asked. The room went silent. Outside, the wind howled through the pines. The fire crackled. Emily's breath came fast and shallow. I'm a senior data analyst for Helix Biosynthetics, she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. We're a pharmaceutical research company based in Seattle. 3 months ago, I started noticing discrepancies in our clinical trial data. Deaths that weren't being reported. Side effects that were being buried. I thought it was just sloppy record keeping at first, but she looked up at Jack, at Tom, at Carla. It wasn't sloppy. It was deliberate. They were falsifying data to push a drug through FDA approval, a drug that was killing people. And when I tried to report it internally, that's when everything went wrong. Tom leaned forward. You reported this to your supervisors? To my direct supervisor, yes, Dr. Marcus Webb. He told me I was mistaken, that I was misinterpreting the data. But the next day I was reassigned to a different project. And the day after that, my apartment was broken into. Nothing was taken, but all my personal files were gone through. My laptop, my research, everything was... They were looking for evidence, looking to see what I'd copied. Did you copy anything? Jack asked. Emily met his eyes, and in that moment, he saw the answer, saw the determination beneath the fear. Yes, she said. I backed up everything, every file, every spreadsheet, every internal memo. I sent it all to an encrypted cloud server before they could scrub it, and then I ran. I was trying to get to my sister's place in Montana when they caught me. Tom exchanged a heavy glance with Jack. Ms. Graves, what you're describing is corporate fraud on a massive scale, possibly conspiracy to commit manslaughter if people died as a result of this drug. This is way beyond my jurisdiction. You need to talk to the FBI. No, Emily nearly shouted, then caught herself. No federal agents. Not yet. You don't understand how deep this goes. Helix Biosynthetics has contracts with half the government. They fund campaigns. They have lobbyists everywhere. If I go to the FBI, word will get back to them before I can even finish giving my statement. And then I'm dead. Actually dead this time. The words hung in the air like smoke. Carla finished her examination and straightened up. Physically, she's stable. Dehydrated, some minor lacerations, rope burns that'll heal, but she needs rest and fluids. I'd recommend a hospital for observation, but a hospital is public, Tom finished grimly. And if these people are looking for her, a hospital admission is a paper trail a mile wide. She can stay here, Jack heard himself say. Tonight, at least, until we figure out the next step. Everyone turned to look at him. Jack, you've got Sophie to think about, Tom said carefully. If what Ms. Graves is saying is true, you could be putting yourself and your daughter in danger by harboring her. Sophie's at Mrs. Henderson's. She's safe. And Emily needs somewhere off the grid. Somewhere they won't think to look. My cabin doesn't exist on any public records. It's technically Forest Service property. No utilities under my name, no address, just coordinates. Emily was shaking her head. No, I can't ask you to do that. You have a child. You can't. You're not asking, Jack interrupted. I'm offering. And before you say no, think about your options. You can go to a hospital and hope they don't find you. You can try to run again and hope they don't have people watching the roads. Or you can stay here for one night, get some real rest, and tomorrow we figure out how to do this smart. How to protect you and bring these people down without getting you killed. Tom looked like he wanted to argue, but something in Jack's expression stopped him. The sheriff had known Jack long enough to recognize when the man's mind was made up. One night, Tom said finally, and I'm posting a deputy on your road. If any black SUVs come within 5 miles of this place, we'll know about it. Thank you, Emily whispered. The arrangements were made quickly. Carla left medication for pain and anxiety. Tom promised to file a minimal report, just enough to make it official without attracting attention. They would reconvene in the morning to discuss next steps. After they left, Jack locked the door and checked every window. He pulled the curtains closed and added more wood to the fire. Emily watched him move through these preparations with hollow eyes. You shouldn't be doing this, she said. You have no idea what these people are capable of. Jack paused, his hand resting on the fireplace mantel. I spent 3 tours in Afghanistan. I know exactly what people are capable of when they think they can get away with it. And I know what happens when good people decide it's not their problem. I'm not your problem. No, Jack agreed, turning to face her. You're a human being who needs help. That makes it everyone's problem, including mine. Emily's face crumpled and she started to cry, deep, wrenching sobs that shook her whole body. Jack crossed the room and knelt in front of her chair again, letting her cry herself out. He didn't offer empty platitudes or tell her everything would be okay. He just stayed there, solid and present, until the storm passed. I'm sorry, Emily gasped. I'm sorry, I'm just so tired. I'm so tired of being scared. Then rest, Jack said simply. You can take my bed. I'll sleep out here on the couch. Tomorrow, when you've had some sleep and some food, we'll figure out how to make you safe, really safe. Not just for tonight, but for good. She looked at him with something like wonder. Why do you care so much? Jack thought about Sophie, about coming home from war to find his life had fallen apart, about the choice he'd made to stay in these mountains and raise his daughter surrounded by pine trees and snow instead of returning to the chaos of the world below. Because I stopped believing in a lot of things, he said quietly. But I never stopped believing that we're supposed to help each other. That's all we've got in the end. Each other. Emily nodded slowly and let him help her to her feet. He showed her to his bedroom, a simple space with a handmade bed, a bookshelf full of Sophie's picture books, and his old military manuals, and a window that looked out at the stars. Lock the door if it makes you feel safer, Jack said. And if you need anything at all, I'm right outside. Jack? Emily said as he turned to leave. Thank you for not asking me to be braver than I am right now. He smiled, just a little. Courage isn't not being scared. It's being terrified and still putting one foot in front of the other. You've already been brave enough for a lifetime today. Get some rest, Emily. He closed the door softly and returned to the living room. The fire had burned down to coals, casting dancing shadows on the log walls. Jack settled onto the couch, but he didn't close his eyes. Instead, he watched the window, watched the darkness beyond the glass, and wondered what kind of people they were dealing with. What kind of monsters left a woman tied to a tree in the wilderness and expected her to simply disappear? His phone buzzed, a text from Mrs. Henderson. Sophie's asking when you're coming to get her. Want me to keep her tonight? She can play with my granddaughter. Jack hesitated, then typed back. That would be great. Thanks, Mary. I'll pick her up first thing tomorrow. Another buzz. This time from Tom Morrison. Deputy Carson is posted at the bottom of your access road. No unusual activity. Sleep tight, Jack. And be careful. Jack set the phone aside and stared into the dying fire. Somewhere out in those dark woods, 3 men had left Emily Graves to die. Somewhere, a billion-dollar company was covering up deaths to push a dangerous drug through approval. Somewhere, people were making decisions that treated human lives as acceptable collateral damage. And here, in a cabin that didn't officially exist, A single dad forest ranger had just stepped between a whistleblower and the people who wanted her silenced. Jack thought about his promise to Emily, about making her safe, not just for tonight, but for good. It was the kind of promise that could change everything, the kind that, once made, couldn't be unmade. Outside, the wind howled through the pines, and in the darkness, something moved through the trees, a shadow among shadows, watching, waiting. But Jack didn't see it. Not yet. Jack woke to the sound of a twig snapping outside. His eyes flew open, and his hand was already reaching for the rifle before his mind fully registered consciousness. The gray light of pre-dawn filtered through the curtains, and the fire had died to ash. He checked his watch, 5:47 a.m. He'd slept maybe 3 hours, and badly. Another sound. Footsteps on the porch, careful and deliberate. Jack moved silently to the window and peered through a gap in the curtain. His muscles relaxed when he saw Deputy Carson stamping his feet against the morning cold, a thermos of coffee in his gloved hands. The young officer looked exhausted but alert, his breath fogging in the frigid air. Jack unlocked the door and stepped out, closing it quietly behind him. "Everything okay, Danny?" Danny Carson was 26, fresh-faced, and still believed in the inherent goodness of people, a quality that would either make him a great cop or break his heart. "Morning, Jack." "Yeah, quiet night. Tom called about an hour ago, wants you to check in when you're up. Also said to tell you he's making some calls this morning, federal calls." "Emily's not going to like that." "Yeah, well, Tom says this is beyond us. Way beyond. He's reaching out to someone he trusts at the Seattle FBI field office, someone outside the normal channels." Danny shifted his weight, uncomfortable. "Jack, is it true what they're saying, that she's blowing the whistle on some pharmaceutical company?" "Where'd you hear that?" "Tom told me enough to keep me alert. Said if any suits show up asking questions, I'm to stall them and call immediately." Danny's young face was troubled. "My mom takes medication made by Helix, blood pressure pills. If what this woman says is true," Jack placed a hand on the deputy's shoulder, "then your mom and a lot of other people need someone brave enough to speak up. That's what Emily's trying to do, at the risk of her own life. That's usually what courage costs." Danny nodded slowly, then glanced at his watch. "My shift ends in an hour. Tom's sending Rodriguez to replace me. You need anything before I go?" "Just keep doing what you're doing. And Danny, thank you." The young deputy smiled. "My dad was a ranger. He always said you guys were the good ones. Guess he was right." Jack watched Danny return to his patrol car before going back inside. The cabin was still quiet, but he could see light under his bedroom door. Emily was awake. He started a pot of coffee and began making breakfast. Scrambled eggs, toast, bacon. Simple, filling comfort food. He just finished setting the table when Emily emerged, wearing the same borrowed clothes from last night. Her hair was pulled back, and though the bruise on her face had darkened to a deep purple, her eyes were clearer. Rest had done her good. "Morning," Jack said. "Coffee?" "Please, God, please." Emily sank into a chair at the kitchen table, and Jack poured her a mug. She wrapped both hands around it like it was precious. "I smelled the bacon. Thought I was dreaming." "Eat," Jack said, sliding a plate in front of her. "We've got a lot to talk about, and you need your strength." They ate in silence for a few minutes. Outside, the sun was rising over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. It was the kind of morning that should have felt peaceful, but tension hummed beneath the surface like a low-voltage current. "Sheriff Morrison is calling the FBI this morning," Jack said finally. "Someone he trusts, someone outside normal channels." Emily's fork clattered against her plate. "No, Jack, I told you. I know what you told me. But Emily, you can't run forever. And you can't take down a company like Helix Biosynthetics alone. You need help, real help, the kind that comes with federal resources and witness protection." "Witness protection?" Emily laughed bitterly. "You mean hiding for the rest of my life? Always looking over my shoulder? Never using my real name again?" "It's better than being dead." "Is it?" She stood abruptly, pacing to the window. "I had a life, Jack. A career I loved. Friends. A sister who just had a baby. I was supposed to be there when my nephew was born, but I was too scared to go to the hospital because I thought they might be watching. Do you know what it's like to choose between staying alive and being part of your own family? Jack set down his coffee. No, but I know what it's like to make impossible choices. And I know that if you don't do this right, you won't have a choice at all. They'll find you, and next time there won't be a forest ranger happening by at the right moment. Emily's shoulders sagged. I'm so tired of being scared. I'm tired of running, but I'm also terrified of what happens if I stop. Then let's make sure when you stop running, you're standing somewhere safe. Somewhere they can't reach you. Jack crossed to where she stood. The FBI agent Tom's calling. His name is Marcus Chen. Tom served with his father in Desert Storm. Says Chen's one of the good ones. Straight arrow, hates corruption more than anything. If anyone can help you do this safely, it's him. Emily studied Jack's face for a long moment. Why are you doing this? Really? You could have just called 911 last night and washed your hands of the whole thing. I could have, Jack agreed. But then I'd have to live with knowing I turned away when someone needed help. And I'd have to explain to my daughter why Daddy didn't do the right thing when it mattered. I don't want to have that conversation. A ghost of a smile crossed Emily's face. Your daughter's lucky to have you. I'm lucky to have her. She's the reason Jack trailed off, then shook his head. After I came back from Afghanistan, I was lost. Angry at the world. My wife left, and I was suddenly a single father to this tiny human who needed me to have my shit together. Sophie saved my life just by existing, by needing me to be better than I was. Emily returned to the table and sat down heavily. Okay, I'll talk to Agent Chen, but only if Tom vouches for him. And only here, not at some FBI office where anyone could be listening. Fair enough. I'll call Tom and tell him. Jack reached for his phone, but before he could dial, it buzzed with an incoming call. Tom Morrison's name flashed on the screen. Tom, I was just about to... Jack, shut up and listen. The sheriff's voice was tight with urgency. We've got a problem. A big one. I just got a call from state police. They found Emily Graves' car. Jack felt ice slide down his spine. Where? Bottom of a ravine off Highway 20, about 15 miles from where you found her. Someone drove it off the road and tried to make it look like an accident. They doused the interior with accelerant and set it on fire. Emily had gone pale, her hands gripping the edge of the table. She'd heard every word. Jack had instinctively put the phone on speaker. Tom, was there... Jack couldn't finish the question. No body. But Jack, here's the thing. State police ran the plates and the VAN. The car's registered to Emily Graves. They've already issued a missing person report and flagged it as suspicious. Within the hour, her face is going to be on every news station in the Pacific Northwest. Jesus Christ, Jack breathed. It gets worse, Tom continued. I got a call this morning from a Detective Sarah Vance with Seattle PD. She's asking questions about Emily Graves. Says there's an active investigation into her whereabouts. Corporate espionage charges. Says Helix Biosynthetics filed a complaint claiming Emily stole proprietary data and fled the state. Emily stood so quickly, her chair toppled backward. That's a lie. They're trying to discredit me before I can tell anyone what I found. I know, Tom said grimly. I didn't tell her anything except that we had no leads. But Jack, if Seattle PD is involved, that means Helix has already started their counteroffensive. They're not just trying to silence Emily. They're trying to destroy her credibility, make her look like a criminal instead of a whistleblower. Jack's mind raced through the implications. How long do we have before they figure out she's here? Hard to say. Could be hours, could be days. Depends on how many resources they're willing to throw at finding her. But Jack, you need to understand something. If Helix has deep enough pockets to get Seattle PD to file corporate espionage charges, they've got the kind of reach that can make people disappear. Legally. They'll have her arrested, and once she's in the system, once she's being transported to Seattle in custody. Tom let the sentence hang. Plenty of opportunities for an accident, Jack finished darkly. Exactly. Which is why I'm bringing Agent Chen in immediately. He's driving up from Seattle now. Should be here by noon. In the meantime, I'm doubling the security on your location. Rodriguez is on his way, and I'm pulling in Keisha from her day off. Between the three of us, we'll keep a perimeter. Tom, that's not going to be enough if Helix sends professionals. I know, but it's what we've got until the feds arrive. Just keep your head down and your rifle close. And Jack, If something happens, if they come before Chen gets there, you get Emily out of those mountains. You know those woods better than anyone. Use that. Copy that. And Jack? I'm sorry I got you into this. You didn't get me into anything. I walked in with my eyes open. Jack glanced at Emily, who stood frozen by the window, her arms wrapped around herself. We'll be okay. Just get Chen here as fast as you can. Jack ended the call and set the phone down carefully. The morning sunlight streaming through the windows felt obscene now, too bright and cheerful for the darkness closing in around them. They're going to paint me as a thief, Emily said quietly, still staring out at the mountains. By the time I can tell my side of the story, no one will believe me. They'll say I'm just trying to save myself from prosecution. Classic villain move, really. Steal company secrets, cry whistleblower when you get caught. Except you're not lying. How do you know? Emily turned to face him, her expression anguished. You've known me for less than 12 hours. For all you know, they're right. Maybe I am a corporate spy. Maybe I did steal those files for a competitor. Maybe... Stop, Jack interrupted. I've spent enough time in war zones to recognize the difference between someone lying to save their own skin and someone telling the truth at great personal cost. You're the latter. And more importantly, if you were just a thief, they wouldn't have tied you to a tree in the middle of nowhere and left you to die. They'd have just had you arrested. Emily's eyes filled with tears. What am I going to do? Even if Agent Chen believes me, even if he can protect me, my entire life is destroyed. My career, my reputation, my freedom, it's all gone. Jack crossed to her and took her gently by the shoulders. Your life isn't destroyed. It's changed. There's a difference. And yeah, it's going to be hard. Probably the hardest thing you've ever done. But you're still breathing, Emily. You're still here. And as long as you're alive, there's a chance to make this right. To stop them from hurting other people. How can you be so sure? Because I've been in the dark places. I've seen what giving up looks like, and I've seen what fighting back looks like. You're a fighter, Emily. Otherwise, you wouldn't have backed up those files. You wouldn't have run. You would have just accepted what they told you and gone back to work like nothing was wrong. Emily wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. I wish I could believe that. Then borrow my belief until you find your own again. Before Emily could respond, Jack's phone buzzed again. This time it was a text from an unknown number. This is Marcus Chen, FBI. Sheriff Morrison gave me your number. I'm approximately 90 minutes from your location. Do not move the witness until I arrive. If you see any suspicious vehicles, call 911 immediately and get to a secure location. We'll explain more when I arrive. Jack showed the text to Emily. That's our guy. 90 minutes. We can hold out for 90 minutes. Emily nodded, but her hands were shaking again. Jack guided her back to the chair and poured her more coffee. Tell me about the data you collected, he said. Not the technical details, but the big picture. What exactly is Helix Biosynthetics doing? Emily wrapped her hands around the mug and took a steadying breath. They're developing a drug called Synthorol. It's supposed to be a breakthrough treatment for chronic pain, non-addictive, highly effective, minimal side effects. The potential market is worth billions, but during the Phase 3 clinical trials, people started dying. Not a lot at first, 1 or 2 here and there, heart attacks, strokes, sudden organ failure. The company attributed it to pre-existing conditions, said the deaths weren't related to the drug. But you found evidence that they were. More than that. I found evidence that they knew. Internal memos discussing the deaths, conversations between executives about how to manage the narrative, instructions to doctors running the trials to reclassify adverse events as unrelated to the drug. And then there were the patients who didn't die but should have been counted as serious adverse events, kidney damage, liver failure, severe cardiac arrhythmias, all of it buried in footnotes or left out of the reports entirely. Jack felt sick. How many people died? At least 47 that I could definitively link to Synthorol, but the real number is probably higher. Some deaths were listed as lost to follow-up, which is code for we stopped tracking them. And that's just in the trials. If this drug gets approved and goes to market, Emily's voice cracked. It could kill thousands, tens of thousands. Also, Helix can be first to market with a blockbuster pain medication. Jesus Christ. The worst part is that it could have been fixed. The drug does work for pain management, but it needs more research, more refinement. Instead of taking the time to do it right, they're rushing it through approval because their investors are getting impatient. They've already spent $800 million on development. If they don't recoup that investment soon, the whole company could collapse. So they're gambling with people's lives. Jack leaned back in his chair, processing. This wasn't just corporate malfeasance. This was mass murder disguised as business as usual. You said you backed up the files. Where are they? Encrypted cloud server. I'm the only one with the password. If something happens to me, the files stay locked forever. That's my insurance policy. As long as I'm alive, there's a chance those files become public. If they kill me, the evidence dies with me. Unless you've already shared the password with someone else. Emily shook her head. I couldn't risk it. If I told my sister or my friends, I'd be putting them in danger too. Helix would go after anyone who might have the password, so I memorized it and didn't write it down anywhere. Probably stupid, but it's not stupid, it's survival. Jack stood and began pacing. Okay, here's what's going to happen. When Agent Chen arrives, you're going to tell him everything you just told me. You're going to give him access to those files, and then he's going to put you somewhere safe while the FBI builds a case. That's the only way this ends without you dead in a ditch. And what happens to you? To your daughter? Once Helix realizes I was here, they'll come after you too. Jack had already thought about that. The moment he'd brought Emily to his cabin, he'd made himself a target. Sophie and I will be fine. I can pull her out of school for a few weeks, take her to stay with my brother in Colorado until this blows over. He's got a ranch, miles from anywhere. We'll be safe. You shouldn't have to uproot your life because of me. Too late. I'm already involved. And honestly, Emily, I wouldn't want it any other way. Some things are worth the risk. They spent the next hour in tense waiting. Jack checked the windows compulsively, watching for any sign of vehicles on the access road. Emily sat at the table, her hands wrapped around her coffee mug, lost in thought. The cabin felt smaller with each passing minute, the walls closing in. At 9:30, Jack's phone rang. Deputy Rodriguez. Jack, we've got movement. Black Escalade just turned onto Fire Road 14. Moving slow, like they're looking for something. Jack's heart kicked into overdrive. How far from my location? Maybe 3 miles. Could be nothing. Could be hunters or tourists. But given the situation, keep eyes on them. If they turn onto my access road, you call me immediately and block the path. Do not engage directly. These aren't normal bad guys, Rodriguez. They're professionals. Copy that. Stay alert, Jack. Jack hung up and turned to Emily, who had gone white. We might have company. Could be nothing, but we need to be ready to move. Where would we go? There's an old fire lookout tower about 2 miles north of here. It's abandoned, but it's defensible. High ground, good sight lines. If things go bad, that's where we're heading. Emily stood on shaky legs. Should we go now? Not yet. Could be a false alarm, but get your shoes on and stay ready. Jack retrieved his rifle from above the door and checked the magazine. 15 rounds. He had 2 more magazines in his pack, plus a 9mm pistol in his bedside table. Enough firepower to hold off a small force, but not enough if they came in numbers. His phone rang again. Tom Morrison this time. Jack, state police just got a hit on Emily's credit card. Someone tried to use it at a gas station in Redmond an hour ago. Card was declined, but it puts whoever has it in the area. Tom, Rodriguez just called. Black Escalade on Fire Road 14. Shit. Okay, I'm 5 minutes from your location. Rodriguez and Keisha are already in position. If that Escalade comes your way, we'll intercept. But Jack, if they get past us somehow, you run. Don't try to be a hero. Just get Emily out of there. What about Agent Chen? He's still 45 minutes out. He's driving fast, but a sound outside. The unmistakable crunch of tires on gravel. Jack moved to the window and peered out. His blood turned to ice. The black Escalade was parked at the edge of his property, maybe 100 yards from the cabin. 2 men in dark clothing were getting out, their movements efficient and practiced. One of them carried what looked like a tactical rifle. Tom, they're here, Jack said quietly. 2 men, armed, military bearing. I'm 90 seconds away. Do not engage. Get Emily to the back of the cabin and... The line went dead. Not disconnected, cut. Jack looked at his phone. No signal. They're jamming communications, he said, his voice flat and calm despite the adrenaline flooding his system. Emily, we're leaving. Now. Emily was already moving, grabbing her jacket with shaking hands. Jack slung his rifle over his shoulder and grabbed his go-bag from the closet. Emergency supplies he kept packed for wilderness rescues. Water, first aid, fire starter, emergency blanket. "Stay behind me," Jack instructed. "We're going out the back door. There's a trail that leads north through heavy timber. They won't be able to follow us by vehicle, and we'll have cover." "What about the sheriff?" "Tom's coming, but we can't wait. Move." They slipped out the back door just as Jack heard the front door crash open. Voices shouted inside the cabin, deep, male, aggressive. Jack led Emily into the tree line at a run, his hand gripping hers to pull her along. Behind them, he heard more shouting, then the sound of boots on the cabin's back porch. "There, they're running!" A gunshot cracked through the morning air. The bullet struck a tree trunk 3 feet to Jack's left, sending bark flying. "Stay low and keep moving," Jack shouted, pushing Emily ahead of him. He zigged to the right, using the thick pine trunks as cover. More shots followed, but they were firing blind now, hoping to get lucky. The forest swallowed them. Jack navigated by instinct, leading Emily along a game trail that wound through dense undergrowth. His breath came hard and fast, his soldier's training taking over. "Keep moving. Put distance between you and the threat. Find defensible ground." Behind them, he could hear the men crashing through the forest. But they were city people, unused to the terrain. They were loud and clumsy, while Jack moved like a ghost, every footfall placed with precision. "Jack," Emily gasped, I can't keep this pace." "You can, and you will," he said firmly. 2 more minutes. We're almost there." The fire lookout tower appeared through the trees, a skeletal structure of metal and wood, 30 feet tall, with a small enclosed cabin at the top. Jack had played here with Sophie last summer, letting her pretend she was a princess in a tower. Now it might be the thing that saved their lives. "Up," he ordered, pushing Emily toward the ladder. "All the way to the top. Don't look down. Just climb." Emily grabbed the rungs and started ascending. Jack waited at the bottom, his rifle trained on the trail they'd just left. Seconds ticked by. He could hear the men getting closer, their voices carried on the wind. "Movement! Northwest! Go! Go!" Emily reached the top and scrambled into the lookout cabin. Jack followed, climbing the ladder with practiced speed. He pulled himself through the opening and immediately slammed the trapdoor shut, sliding the bolt lock home. The lookout cabin was maybe 8 feet by 8 feet, with windows on all 4 sides and a metal roof. Not bulletproof, but better than being caught in the open. Jack set his rifle by the north window and took stock of their position. "Stay away from the windows," he told Emily. "Get in the center and stay low." Through the south window, he could see 2 men emerge from the tree line. They spotted the tower immediately and stopped, conferring in low voices. One of them pulled out a phone, tried it, then shook his head. Still no signal. The jamming equipment must be back at their vehicle. Jack watched them with cold calculation. They were professionals, but they were also in unfamiliar territory. They didn't know these woods. They didn't know what resources he had. And they definitely didn't know that by now, Tom Morrison and his deputies would be closing in. One of the men raised his rifle and aimed at the tower. "Get down!" Jack shouted, pulling Emily to the floor just as bullets tore through the wooden walls. Glass shattered. Splinters flew. The sound was deafening in the small space. Then, as suddenly as it started, the shooting stopped. Jack risked a glance out the window. The men were retreating back into the tree line. Why? They had them pinned. They could just wait them out, or... The answer came in the form of distant sirens. Tom Morrison and cavalry had arrived. "Thank God," Emily breathed. But Jack's jaw was tight. "This isn't over. Those men know where we are now. And once they regroup, once they bring more people... Emily, we need to end this, permanently. You need to give that evidence to Agent Chen the second he arrives, and then you need to let the FBI tear Helix Biosynthetics apart from the inside. It's the only way you're ever going to be safe." Emily met his eyes, and he saw something shift in her expression. The fear was still there, but beneath it was something harder, something determined. "Okay," she said. "Okay, I'm done running. Let's finish this." The sirens grew louder, and through the shattered windows of the lookout tower, Jack watched 3 patrol cars converge on his cabin below. Tom Morrison's massive frame emerged from the lead vehicle, his service weapon drawn, followed by Rodriguez and Deputy Keisha Washington. They moved with practiced efficiency, clearing the perimeter while the two armed men had vanished back into the forest like smoke. "They're gone," Jack said, lowering his rifle slightly. "Pulled back when they heard the cavalry coming." Emily remained pressed against the floor, her breath coming in ragged gasps. "Will they come back?" "Eventually, but not right now, not with half the county sheriff's department crawling all over this place." Jack pulled out his phone. Still no signal. "The jamming equipment must still be active. We need to get down there and warn Tom." "But what if those men are waiting? What if they're watching to see who comes out?" Jack considered this, scanning the tree line through each window. The forest was still. Almost too still. Birds that should have been singing their morning songs had gone silent. That was never a good sign. "Tom's not an idiot," Jack said finally. "He'll secure the area before we come down. We just need to wait for his signal." They didn't have to wait long. Within minutes, Tom Morrison appeared at the base of the tower, one hand cupped around his mouth. "Jack, you two okay up there?" "We're fine," Jack called back. "Two shooters, both armed with tactical rifles. They retreated when you arrived. Tom, they're jamming communications. We've got no cell signal." Tom's face darkened. "That explains why you didn't answer your phone. Hang tight. We're going to sweep the immediate area, then we'll get you down." Jack watched as the three deputies fanned out, moving through the forest with weapons raised. They were good cops, dedicated and brave, but they were small-town law enforcement facing off against what appeared to be professional mercenaries. The mismatch in training and resources was stark and terrifying. "Jack," Emily said quietly from her position on the floor, "those men, they weren't just hired muscle. The way they moved, the weapons they carried, the tactical gear. That cost serious money. Helix didn't just send someone to scare me, they sent people to make me disappear." "I know. You could have been killed. You almost were killed. And for what? For someone you don't even know?" Jack turned from the window to look at her. Her face was smudged with dirt, her borrowed clothes torn from their flight through the forest, but her eyes held a fierce clarity that hadn't been there the night before. "My unit had a saying in Afghanistan," Jack said. "We didn't always agree on politics or religion or what we were even doing there. But we agreed on one thing. You don't leave people behind. You don't walk away when someone needs help. That's not about knowing them. That's about knowing yourself." Emily's eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them back. "I wish I'd met someone like you before all this started. Before I became a liability to everyone who gets near me." "You're not a liability. You're a witness. There's a difference." A sharp whistle from below interrupted them. Tom Morrison stood at the base of the tower, waving them down. "Clear. Come on down, but stay alert." Jack helped Emily to her feet and unbolted the trap door. "I'll go first, then you follow. Keep your hands on the rails at all times. Don't look down." The descent seemed to take forever, each rung of the ladder a small eternity. Jack's muscles were tight with tension, half expecting another gunshot to ring out from the forest. But they reached the ground without incident, and Tom immediately ushered them toward his patrol car. "Rodriguez found tire tracks leading back to Fire Road 14, Tom said, his voice low and urgent. "Professional tread pattern, probably off-road rated. These guys knew what they were doing. Also found this." He held up a small black device about the size of a deck of cards. "Military-grade signal jammer, effective radius of about half a mile. They planted it near your cabin." "Jesus," Jack breathed. "Tom, who are we dealing with here?" "I was about to ask you the same thing. Because whatever this is, it's way above my pay grade." Tom opened the back door of his cruiser. "Get in, both of you. We're going to the station. Agent Chen should be there in about 20 minutes, and we need to have this conversation in a place with thick walls and multiple exits." Emily hesitated at the car door. "What about Jack's daughter? If these people know where he lives, they might—" "Already thought of that," Tom interrupted. "Called Mary Henderson 15 minutes ago. She's taking Sophie and her granddaughter to her sister's place in Spokane. Won't tell anyone where they're going, not even me. Sophie will be safe." Relief flooded through Jack so intensely it made him dizzy. "Thank you, Tom." "Don't thank me yet. We're still neck deep in a situation that could get a lot of us killed." Tom's radio crackled, and he grabbed it. "Morrison here. Sheriff, this is Keisha. You need to see this. Back of Merrick's cabin. Now." Tom's jaw tightened. "On my way. You two stay in the car. Lock the doors. If anything happens, Rodriguez has the keys. He'll get you out of here." Jack didn't like being sidelined, but he understood the logic. He and Emily climbed into the back seat, and Tom locked them in before jogging toward the cabin with his hand on his weapon. "What do you think they found?" Emily asked, her voice small. "Nothing good." They sat in tense silence, watching through the car windows as Tom disappeared around the back of the cabin. Minutes ticked by. Jack's mind raced through possibilities, each worse than the last. Had the men left something behind? A bomb? A threat? When Tom finally reappeared, his face was grim. He climbed into the driver's seat and started the engine without a word. "Tom," Jack prompted, "what did Keisha find?" The sheriff met Jack's eyes in the rearview mirror. "Photos. Dozens of them, pinned to your back door with a knife. Photos of Sophie, at school, at the playground, at Mary Henderson's house. They've been watching your daughter, Jack." The world tilted. Jack felt like he'd been punched in the gut, all the air driven from his lungs. "They what?" "The message is clear," Tom continued, his voice hard. "They know where Sophie is. They know her routine. They're telling you that helping Emily Graves puts your daughter in danger." Jack's hands curled into fists. A cold, dark rage filled him, the kind he hadn't felt since the war, since the day his unit had found a school being used as a weapons cache by insurgents who didn't care about the children inside. That same primal fury, that bone-deep need to protect the innocent from evil. "Those pictures," Emily said, her voice shaking. "Did they have dates? Times?" "Most were from the last 3 days," Tom said, "but a few go back almost a week. They've been planning this, watching and waiting for the right moment." Emily's face crumpled. Oh, God, Jack, I'm so sorry. I should never have. You should have just left me in those woods. You should have." "Stop," Jack said, his voice cold and hard. "Don't you dare apologize for being a victim. And don't you dare suggest I should have left you to die. These people, whoever they are, they made their choice when they decided human lives were worth less than corporate profits. They made their choice when they tied you to that tree. And they made their choice when they threatened my daughter. Jack, no. Listen to me, Emily. I'm not backing down. I'm not scared off by threats. What I am is done playing defense. It's time we went on the offensive." Tom pulled out onto the main road, his eyes constantly checking the mirrors. "What are you thinking?" "I'm thinking that Helix Biosynthetics is used to people being afraid of them, used to threats working. They send their goons, wave around some scary pictures, and people fold. But they made a mistake this time. They threatened my daughter, and that means they've given me permission to take off the gloves." Emily leaned forward in her seat. "Jack, what are you saying?" "I'm saying we stop waiting for them to make the next move. We take the fight to them. You've got evidence that could destroy this company, right? Files that prove they falsified clinical trial data, buried deaths, committed fraud on a massive scale? Yes, but then we don't sit around waiting for Agent Chen to build a case over the next 6 months while these people hunt you. We go public, now, today. We take those files and we give them to every news organization, every regulatory agency, every watchdog group we can find. We flood the zone so fast and so hard that Helix Biosynthetics doesn't have time to spin the story or intimidate witnesses." Tom's eyes widened. "Jack, that's insane. The FBI will want to control the release of evidence, build a prosecutable case. The FBI will want to protect their conviction rate," Jack interrupted. "They'll want everything perfect before they move. But Emily doesn't have time for perfect. She needs to stay alive long enough to testify, and the best way to do that is to make herself too visible to kill quietly. You can't make a whistleblower disappear once the whole world knows what they witnessed." Emily was silent for a long moment, her mind clearly racing. Then, "He's right." "Emily, think about what you're saying," Tom cautioned. "Once you go public, there's no taking it back. Your life will never be private again. Every journalist, every conspiracy theorist, every opportunist will be coming after you. Not to mention Helix's lawyers. They'll sue you for everything you've got and then some." "I don't care," Emily said, and there was steel in her voice now. "I'm already living in hell. At least this way I'm fighting back. At least this way those 47 people who died in the clinical trials won't have died for nothing." Jack felt a fierce pride in this woman he'd known for barely 24 hours. Somewhere between the terror of being found in the woods and the gunfire at the tower, Emily Graves had found her spine. Then we do it, Jack said. Tom, how far are we from the station? 10 minutes. And Agent Chen? Should be arriving right around the same time we do. Good. Then here's what's going to happen. Emily gives Chen full access to all the files she backed up. She cooperates completely with the FBI investigation. But simultaneously, we contact every major news outlet. The New York Times, Washington Post, 60 Minutes, whoever will listen. We give them the story and enough evidence to run with it. By tonight, Helix Biosynthetics will be the top story on every news channel in the country. And what about Sophie? Tom asked quietly. What about your daughter, Jack? If you do this, if you make yourself part of this story, you'll be painting a target on both your backs. Jack had already thought about that, had run through the scenarios in his mind during the silent ride. Sophie stays in hiding until this is over, and I stay with Emily. I become her bodyguard, her witness to what she experienced. I make myself part of the story too, so that if something happens to me, it only adds credibility to her claims. I become insurance. That's not your job, Emily protested. You're a father. You should be protecting your daughter, not... I am protecting my daughter, Jack said firmly. By making sure the people who threatened her learn that threats don't work. By teaching Sophie that sometimes doing the right thing means taking risks, and by making damn sure that a company that values profits over human lives doesn't get away with murder. The sheriff's station appeared ahead, a modest brick building that served a county of fewer than 15,000 people. 2 unfamiliar vehicles were parked in the lot, a black sedan with government plates and a news van from the local ABC affiliate. Looks like the circus has already started, Tom muttered. That news van is probably here about Emily's car being found. The local reporters have been calling all morning. Perfect, Jack said. That means the infrastructure is already in place. We just need to give them a bigger story. They pulled into the lot and Tom killed the engine. Last chance to change your mind, he said, looking at Emily in the rearview mirror. Once we walk through those doors, once you start talking to federal agents and reporters, there's no going back. You need to be sure. Emily's hand found Jack's, and she squeezed it tightly. I'm sure. For the first time since this nightmare started, I'm absolutely sure. They climbed out of the car just as a man in a dark suit emerged from the station. He was Asian American, mid-40s, with sharp eyes that missed nothing. He had the bearing of someone who'd spent time in the military before joining federal law enforcement, back straight, movements economical, constantly assessing his surroundings. Sheriff Morrison, he said, extending his hand. Special Agent Marcus Chen, FBI. I believe you have a witness I need to speak with. Agent Chen, this is Jack Merrick and Emily Graves. Tom made the introductions quickly. Let's get inside. We've got a lot to discuss, and not much time. They moved through the station quickly, past curious deputies and a receptionist who looked up from her computer with wide eyes. Tom led them to his office. A small room with wood-paneled walls covered in commendations and family photos, and closed the door firmly. Agent Chen wasted no time. He set a digital recorder on Tom's desk and addressed Emily directly. Ms. Graves, I understand you have information regarding corporate fraud and potentially negligent homicide related to a pharmaceutical company called Helix Biosynthetics. Before we begin, I want you to understand that anything you tell me will be used in a federal investigation. You have the right to have an attorney present. I don't want an attorney, Emily interrupted. I want to tell you everything right now, but I need something from you first. Chen's eyebrows rose slightly. What kind of something? A promise that you'll move fast, that you won't let this drag out while your bureau builds the perfect case. People are dying, Agent Chen. People are taking a drug right now, right this very second, that could kill them. And every day that Helix Biosynthetics stays in business is another day they get closer to full FDA approval for Synthorol. Once that happens, once it hits the market, the death count will be in the thousands. Chen studied her for a long moment. Ms. Graves, I can't promise you speed in a federal investigation. There are procedures, protocols, then we'll do it without you, Jack said bluntly. We'll take everything Emily has and we'll go public. Today. Within hours, every news organization in the country will have the story. And yes, that might compromise your investigation, and yes, it might make building a criminal case harder. But at least people will know. At least the FDA will have to pause the approval process while they investigate. Chen's expression hardened. Mr. Merrick, I understand you're trying to protect Ms. Graves, but what you're suggesting is incredibly dangerous. Going public without law enforcement protection, without a carefully planned strategy, you'd be making yourselves targets for every lawyer and spin doctor Helix can afford. Not to mention putting witnesses at risk, potentially contaminating evidence. We're already targets, Emily said quietly. They tied me to a tree and left me to die. This morning they shot at us. They've been photographing Jack's 7-year-old daughter. Agent Chen, with all due respect, we're way past worried about contaminating evidence. We're fighting for our lives. The room fell silent except for the ticking of an old clock on Tom's wall. Chen looked at each of them in turn. Emily with her bruised face and determined eyes, Jack standing protective and immovable beside her, Tom Morrison with his weathered cop's face showing both concern and admiration. Finally, Chen sighed and sat down heavily in one of Tom's chairs. All right. Here's what I can do. You give me everything, and I mean everything. Full access to the files, written statements, names of everyone at Helix who might have knowledge of the fraud. In exchange, I'll fast-track this. I'll have agents in Seattle raiding Helix's offices within 72 hours. I'll coordinate with the FDA to immediately halt the approval process for Synthorol. And I'll make sure you both have round-the-clock protection until we can neutralize the threat. That's not good enough, Jack said. 72 hours is too long. In 72 hours, Helix can destroy evidence, intimidate witnesses, move money offshore. We need them hit hard and fast before they know what's coming. And how exactly do you propose we do that? Chen asked, his patience clearly wearing thin. Jack pulled out his phone. The signal jammer was far enough away now that he had full bars. We use the press. That news van outside? That's just the beginning. Emily and I are going to hold a press conference. Today. In 2 hours, right here at this station. We're going to tell the whole story. The falsified trials, the deaths, the cover-up, all of it. And we're going to release enough documentation to back it up that Helix can't claim we're lying. Chen stood abruptly. That's the worst possible. It's the smartest possible move, Jack interrupted. Because once we go public, once Emily's face is on every news channel with her story, she stops being an easy target. You can't quietly disappear someone who's already headline news. And more importantly, once the story breaks, Helix Biosynthetics will go into damage control mode. They'll be too busy trying to save their stock price and reputation to worry about hunting Emily down. Or they'll double down on silencing her, Chen shot back. Make an example out of her to discourage other whistleblowers. Then you better make sure your protection detail is good, Jack said coldly, because we're doing this, with you or without you. But I'd much rather have the FBI on our side when the shit hits the fan. Emily touched Jack's arm gently. Agent Chen, I know this isn't how you want to handle this. I know it's messy and risky and probably breaks half a dozen protocols. But Jack's right about one thing. I'm done hiding. I'm done being afraid. If I'm going to die, I want to die fighting. I want those 47 people who died in the trials to mean something. Please, help us do this right. Chen looked at her for a long moment, and something in his expression softened. He'd been in law enforcement long enough to recognize genuine courage when he saw it. If we do this, he said slowly, if we go public this fast, we need to be smart about it. We can't just dump raw data and hope the press figures it out. We need a narrative. We need key documents that are irrefutable. And we need you, Ms. Graves, to be prepared for the absolute media circus that's about to descend on your life. Emily looked at Jack, and he saw all the fear and uncertainty that had defined the last few days crystallize into something harder, something unbreakable. I'm sure, she said. Let's burn them down. The next 2 hours were a whirlwind of activity. Chen made calls, bringing in resources from the Seattle field office. A media consultant arrived, a sharp-eyed woman named Diana Ross, who'd handled dozens of high-profile FBI press conferences. A team of 4 agents set up a protective perimeter around the station, and Emily, with Jack's steadying presence beside her, began the process of organizing her evidence into a coherent, devastating narrative. She pulled up her encrypted cloud server on Tom's desktop computer, typing in a password that seemed to take forever. When the files finally loaded, even Chen let out a low whistle. This is comprehensive, he said, scrolling through folder after folder of documents. Trial data, internal memos, financial records, email chains between executives. Ms. Graves, how did you get access to all this? I was the senior data analyst, Emily explained. I had legitimate access to most of it as part of my job. The rest I obtained through less official channels. Logged into systems I technically wasn't supposed to be in, copied files from shared drives that most people didn't know existed. That's going to be a problem legally, Chen said. Defense attorneys will argue the evidence was obtained illegally, that it's inadmissible. That's why we're going public first, Jack interjected. Let the court of public opinion see the evidence before lawyers can bury it in motions and technicalities. By the time this goes to trial, the damage to Helix will already be done. Diana Ross had been studying Emily with a critical eye. We need to get her cleaned up before the press conference. No offense, Ms. Graves, but you look like you've been through hell, which is good for sympathy, but bad for credibility. People need to see you as a competent professional, not a victim. She is a victim, Jack said sharply. I know that, you know that, but the public needs to see her as a heroic whistleblower, not someone who needs rescuing. It's unfair, but it's how the media works. Diana turned to Emily. There's a bathroom down the hall. I brought some clothes, makeup, basic styling tools. Let's make you look like the serious scientist you are. Emily nodded and followed Diana out of the office, leaving Jack alone with Chen and Tom. She's remarkable, Chen said quietly once they were gone. Most people would have crumbled by now, but she's still fighting. She's stronger than she knows, Jack agreed, and she deserves better than to spend the rest of her life looking over her shoulder. That's assuming she survives the next few weeks, Chen said grimly. Jack, I need you to understand something. Once we do this press conference, once Emily's face is everywhere, Helix Biosynthetics is going to throw everything they have at discrediting her. They'll dig up every mistake she's ever made, every bad decision, every embarrassing moment from her past. They'll try to paint her as mentally unstable, as a disgruntled employee, as someone with an axe to grind. And they might come after you too, questioning your motives, suggesting you're trying to be a hero for attention or money. Let them try, Jack said. I've been through worse. Have you? Have you ever had your entire life dissected by hostile lawyers and aggressive journalists? Have you ever had strangers on the internet digging through your divorce records, your military service, your parenting choices? Because that's what's coming, Jack. For both of you. Jack met Chen's eyes steadily. I spent 3 tours in Afghanistan watching good people die for reasons that never made sense. I've carried wounded soldiers through minefields. I've made decisions that cost lives and saved lives in equal measure. You want to talk about having my life dissected? Fine. Let them look. They'll find a man who isn't perfect, but who tried his best to do right by the people who depended on him. If that's not good enough for the court of public opinion, then that says more about them than it does about me. Chen studied him for a moment, then nodded slowly. Okay. You're in this for real. Good. Because Emily's going to need someone who won't fold when things get ugly. And they will get ugly, Jack. I can promise you that. Tom's desk phone rang and the sheriff picked it up. Morrison. Yeah. Wait, what? When? Shit. Okay, I'm sending deputies now. He slammed the phone down, his face pale. That was dispatch. There's been an explosion at Jack's cabin. Fire department is responding now, but the entire structure is engulfed. Jack felt his stomach drop. Anyone hurt? No, the cabin was empty, thank God, but Jack, it's gone. Everything you owned is just stuff, Jack finished, though his chest felt tight. Stuff can be replaced. Sophie's safe. That's what matters. But it wasn't just about stuff, and they all knew it. The explosion was a message, a demonstration of reach and power, a promise that Helix Biosynthetics could strike anywhere, anytime. They're escalating, Chen said, already on his phone again. Tom, I need your entire department on high alert. Jack, I'm putting protective detail on you and your daughter effective immediately. Emily, too, obviously. No one goes anywhere without an armed escort. Good luck enforcing that, Jack muttered. I'm serious, Jack. These people just blew up your home. They're not playing around anymore. Neither am I. Emily and Diana returned, and the transformation was remarkable. Emily's hair was pulled back in a professional bun, her face lightly made up to cover the worst of the bruising without looking overdone. She wore dark slacks and a navy blue blazer that Diana had brought. Simple, professional, authoritative. She looked like what she was, a scientist with something important to say. "How do I look?" Emily asked, and Jack could hear the nervousness beneath her steady voice. "Like someone the world needs to listen to," he said honestly. Diana checked her watch. 30 minutes until we go live. Let's run through the key points one more time. Emily, you're going to start with a brief statement, no more than 3 minutes. Hit the highlights. Who you are, what you discovered, why you're coming forward. Then we open it up for questions. I'll be standing off to the side, and if I make this signal, she touched her ear. That means wrap it up. Understood? Understood. Don't get defensive if reporters ask tough questions. Stay calm, stick to the facts, and remember, you're not on trial here. You're simply telling the truth. Let the evidence speak for itself. What about Jack? Emily asked. Is he going to be part of this? Diana looked at Chen, who looked at Jack. That's up to you, Chen said. You don't have to be. We can keep you as an unnamed Good Samaritan, protect your identity. No, Jack said. I'm standing with her. If they're going to come after Emily, they'll have to go through me first. Might as well make that public from the start. Then we need to prepare you too, Diana said. Jack, when reporters ask why you got involved, what are you going to say? The truth, that I found someone who needed help and I couldn't walk away. Good, simple, honest, relatable. Don't elaborate unless pressed. And Jack, when they ask about the explosion at your cabin, about your daughter being in danger, keep your emotions in check. I know that's hard, but any display of anger or fear gives them a narrative they can run with. Protective father driven by revenge, that kind of thing. I am driven by revenge, Jack said quietly. They threatened my daughter. They destroyed my home. I'm not going to pretend I'm some kind of saint in all this. You don't have to be a saint, Diana countered, but you need to be the kind of hero people can relate to. Not Rambo, not a vigilante, just a good man doing the right thing under impossible circumstances. Jack wanted to argue, but he saw the wisdom in her words. This wasn't just about stopping Helix Biosynthetics. It was about controlling the narrative, about making sure Emily's truth couldn't be buried or distorted. All right, he said, I'll play it your way. For now. The press conference was set up in the station's community room, a space normally used for town halls and public meetings. News crews had arrived from Seattle, Spokane, and Portland, along with stringers from national outlets. The room buzzed with energy and anticipation. Word had spread fast that something big was breaking. Jack stood in the hallway with Emily, both of them watching through a window as reporters set up cameras and tested microphones. Emily's hands were shaking again, and she kept taking deep breaths. You don't have to do this, Jack said softly. Even now, you can walk away. Let Chen handle it through official channels. And spend the rest of my life wondering if those 47 people died for nothing? Emily shook her head. No. This is what I have to do. This is the only way I'll ever be able to sleep again. Then I'll be right there beside you. She turned to look at him, and there were tears in her eyes. Why, Jack? Why are you doing this? Really? You've already lost your home. Your daughter's in hiding. You could still walk away, tell them you were just a forest ranger who found someone in the woods, and handed them off to the proper authorities. So why are you still here? Jack thought about Sophie, about the world he wanted her to grow up in, a world where people stood up to bullies and corporations couldn't buy their way out of accountability, a world where doing the right thing mattered more than doing the safe thing. Because I want my daughter to be proud of her father, he said simply, and because someone a long time ago told me that the only thing necessary for evil to triumph is for good people to do nothing. I guess I never forgot that. Emily wiped her eyes carefully, trying not to smudge Diana's carefully applied makeup. Your daughter already has every reason to be proud. You know that, right? I hope so. Diana appeared at the end of the hallway, making hand signals. It was time. Jack took Emily's hand and squeezed it once. Remember, you're not on trial. You're just telling the truth. That's all anyone can ask of you. They walked into the community room together, and the flash of cameras was instantaneous and overwhelming. Questions were shouted from every direction, but Diana stepped forward to the microphone first. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming on such short notice. I'm Diana Ross with the FBI's Seattle field office. We have a significant statement to make regarding ongoing corporate fraud and potential criminal negligence in the pharmaceutical industry. Ms. Emily Graves will be making a statement, after which we'll take limited questions. Please hold all questions until she's finished. Diana stepped aside and Emily approached the microphone. For a moment, she just stood there, looking out at the sea of cameras and faces. Jack could see her hands gripping the sides of the podium, knuckles white. Then she took a breath and began to speak. My name is Emily Graves. Until 4 days ago, I was a senior data analyst at Helix Biosynthetics, a pharmaceutical research company based in Seattle. I'm here today to tell you about a drug called Synthorol, and about the people who died during its clinical trials, people whose deaths were hidden, whose suffering was minimized, whose lives were deemed acceptable losses in the pursuit of corporate profits. Her voice was steady now, gaining strength with each word. Jack stood just off to the side, close enough that she could see him if she needed reassurance, far enough that the cameras would focus on her. 3 months ago, I began noticing irregularities in the clinical trial data for Synthorol, deaths that were listed as unrelated to the drug, severe adverse events that were reclassified as minor complications, patients who were marked as lost to follow-up when they had actually suffered catastrophic organ failure. At first, I thought these were clerical errors, data entry mistakes. But as I dug deeper, I realized they were deliberate falsifications designed to hide the fact that Synthorol was killing people. A murmur ran through the assembled reporters. Cameras clicked furiously. I documented everything, Emily continued. Internal memos discussing how to manage negative trial results, email chains between executives debating whether to report deaths to the FDA, financial projections showing that delaying the drug's approval would cost the company billions in lost revenue and investor confidence. And I backed up all of this data before the company could destroy it. She paused, looking directly into the cameras. At least 47 people died during Synthorol's clinical trials. 47 mothers, fathers, sons, daughters, people who trusted that the drug being tested on them had gone through proper safety protocols. People who died so that Helix Biosynthetics could meet their quarterly earnings projections. Emily's voice wavered for just a moment, and Jack saw her grip the podium tighter. He gave her a slight nod. She was doing perfectly. When I tried to report these findings internally, I was reassigned to a different project. My apartment was broken into. And then 4 days ago, 3 men forced me off the road, drove me into the woods, tied me to a tree, and left me to die. They told me this was a message, that if I kept digging, they would make sure no one ever found my body. The room had gone completely silent. Even the cameras had stopped clicking. I was found by Jack Merrick, a forest ranger, who risked his own life to save mine. And this morning, those same people who left me to die came back. They shot at us. They destroyed Mr. Merrick's home, and they've been photographing his 7-year-old daughter as a threat to keep us silent. Emily's eyes blazed with an anger that made her look formidable rather than afraid. But we're not going to be silent. I have evidence of massive fraud, criminal negligence, and conspiracy to conceal information from federal regulators. And starting today, that evidence is being turned over to the FBI, the FDA, and the media. The American people deserve to know what Helix Biosynthetics has done, and the families of the 47 people who died deserve justice. She stepped back from the microphone, and for a moment there was absolute silence. Then every reporter in the room started shouting questions at once. Diana stepped forward immediately, holding up her hands to quiet the chaos. One at a time, please. You, in the front. A young reporter from CNN stood, her recorder thrust forward. Ms. Graves, you mentioned you have documentation of these deaths. Can you provide specific names and dates? Emily nodded, her composure returning. I have 47 documented cases with full names, dates of death, and the official cause of death as reported by Helix versus the actual medical evidence showing Synthorol-related complications. Those documents are being reviewed by the FBI and will be released to the public pending their approval. Ms. Graves, Katie Chen from the Washington Post. An older woman in the back row stood. You claim the company tried to have you killed. That's an extraordinary accusation. What proof do you have that Helix Biosynthetics ordered your abduction? I can't prove a direct connection, Emily admitted, and Jack saw Diana wince slightly at the concession. What I can prove is that after I attempted to report my findings internally, I was immediately targeted. My apartment was searched, my work computer was confiscated, and I was reassigned away from any projects involving Synthorol. Then, when I refused to let it go, 3 professional operatives abducted me. These weren't random criminals. They knew exactly who I was and what I'd discovered. A man from Bloomberg raised his hand. What's Helix Biosynthetics' response to these allegations? We haven't contacted them yet, Agent Chen interjected, stepping up to the microphone. This is an active federal investigation, and we're coordinating with multiple agencies, including the FDA. Helix will have their opportunity to respond through proper legal channels. Mr. Merrick, a local reporter from the Spokane affiliate, turned her attention to Jack. Why did you get involved in this? You're a forest ranger, not law enforcement. Weren't you putting yourself and your family at risk? Jack stepped forward to the microphone, trying to channel Diana's advice about staying relatable. I found someone who needed help. I'm a father, and I kept thinking, what if that was my daughter tied to a tree in the middle of nowhere? I'd hope someone would help her. That's all I did. I helped. But your cabin was destroyed this morning in what investigators are calling a deliberate explosion, the reporter pressed. Do you regret getting involved? Jack's jaw tightened. He thought about Sophie's room, the handmade bookshelves he'd built, the photos on the walls documenting 7 years of birthdays and holidays and ordinary moments. All of it gone. Turned to ash because he'd done the right thing. I regret that there are people in this world who value money more than human lives, he said carefully. I regret that Emily Graves had to risk everything to expose corruption that should never have existed in the first place. But do I regret helping her? No. I'd do it again. The questions continued for another 20 minutes, a relentless barrage that Emily handled with increasing confidence. She explained the science behind Synthorol's mechanism of action, detailed the specific ways clinical trial data had been manipulated, and methodically dismantled every potential defense Helix might mount. Jack watched her transform from a frightened woman in borrowed clothes to a formidable force armed with truth and righteous anger. Finally, Diana called an end to the conference. That's all we have time for today. Ms. Graves will not be available for individual interviews at this time. All further inquiries should be directed through the FBI's Seattle field office. Thank you. They were ushered quickly out of the community room and back into Tom Morrison's office, where Chen immediately locked the door. The protective detail agents positioned themselves outside, creating a secure perimeter. You were brilliant, Diana said to Emily, her professional demeanor cracking into genuine admiration. Seriously, I've worked with career politicians who couldn't have handled that better. Emily sank into a chair, the adrenaline clearly draining out of her. I thought I was going to throw up the entire time. You hit it well. Diana's phone buzzed and she glanced at it. Okay, it's already hitting the wire services. Associated Press just picked it up. Within an hour, this will be national news. By tonight, international. Chen was on his own phone, his expression growing grimmer with each call. My SAC wants you both in Seattle immediately. Full protective custody. We've got a secure facility where we can debrief you properly and keep you safe while we build the case. What about Sophie? Jack asked immediately. We'll send a team to pick her up in Spokane and bring her to the facility. You'll be together, just in a more secure location. Jack shook his head. No. Sophie doesn't go anywhere near a federal facility. She stays with Mary Henderson's sister, where no one knows where she is. She stays off the grid until this is over. Jack, I can't protect her if I don't know where she is. You can't protect her if Helix has people inside federal law enforcement either, Jack shot back. We don't know how deep their reach goes. For all we know, they've got agents on their payroll or informants who can track movement in and out of FBI facilities. Sophie stays hidden. That's not negotiable. Chen looked like he wanted to argue, but Tom Morrison spoke up. Jack's right. Keeping the kid off the radar is smart. If this goes sideways, if somehow Helix figures out where Emily is being held, they might try to use Sophie as leverage. Better if even we don't know exactly where she is. Fine, Chen conceded. But Jack, if you're going to stay with Emily as her, what, bodyguard? Witness? Then you need to follow our protocols. No going rogue, no making decisions without consulting with the protective detail. We do this by the book. Your book hasn't exactly kept people safe so far, Jack pointed out. Emily was almost killed twice. which is why we're taking this seriously now. Seattle field office is pulling out all the stops. We're raiding Helix's headquarters tomorrow morning at dawn. Every computer, every file cabinet, every piece of paper in that building is getting seized. We're freezing their bank accounts, interviewing their employees, tracking down everyone who had knowledge of this fraud. This is going to be the biggest pharmaceutical investigation since... Chen's phone rang, cutting him off. He answered it, listened for a moment, and his face went pale. When? Are you sure? Okay. Okay, I'm on my way. He hung up and looked at everyone in the room. That was my tech team in Seattle. Helix Biosynthetics just issued a press release. They're claiming Emily Graves is a disgruntled former employee who was terminated for cause 3 weeks ago after being caught stealing proprietary data. They're saying she's fabricated these allegations as revenge, and that they're prepared to provide documentation proving she's been mentally unstable for months. Emily's face went white. That's a lie. I was never terminated. I walked away to protect myself. I know, Chen said grimly, but they've got their narrative locked and loaded. They were ready for this, which means they anticipated you might go public and had their counterattack prepared in advance. Of course they did, Jack said bitterly. This is what corporations do. Attack the whistleblower's credibility before anyone can examine the actual evidence. Diana was already typing furiously on her laptop. They're fast, very fast. The press release went out 30 seconds after your press conference ended. They had people watching, waiting to respond immediately. Jack's right. This was pre-planned. They have a whole crisis management strategy mapped out. Then we hit them harder, Emily said, her voice steady despite her pale face. We released the documentation, all of it, not just summaries or excerpts, the full files. Let the public see exactly what Helix was doing. Emily, we need to be strategic, Chen cautioned. If we dump everything at once, we lose control of the narrative. Better to release information gradually, keep the story in the news cycle longer. There's no time for strategy, Emily interrupted. Don't you see? They're already ahead of us. While we're planning the perfect information campaign, they're spending millions on lawyers and PR firms to bury the truth. We need to overwhelm them. We need to flood the zone with so much documentation that their spin doctors can't keep up. Jack found himself nodding. She's right. This isn't a chess match where we carefully plan 5 moves ahead. This is a street fight. You hit hard, you hit fast, and you don't give your opponent time to recover. Chen looked at Tom Morrison, who shrugged. They've gotten this far by trusting their instincts. Maybe we should listen. Fine, Chen said after a long moment. Fine. Diana, work with Emily to prepare a data dump. Everything that's not going to compromise ongoing investigative techniques. We'll release it through a dedicated website and push it to every major news organization simultaneously. But Emily, once we do this, there's no walking it back. Every document you release becomes public record. Defense attorneys will tear through it looking for inconsistencies. Are you sure your evidence is solid? It's solid, Emily said without hesitation. I've been a data analyst for 12 years. I know how to document findings. Everything I collected is time-stamped, cross-referenced, and backed up with multiple sources. Let them tear through it. They'll only prove I'm right. Over the next several hours, Tom Morrison's small-town sheriff's office became the nerve center of what would later be called one of the most significant corporate whistleblower cases in American history. Diana and Emily worked at Tom's computer, organizing thousands of pages of documentation into a coherent, searchable database. Chen coordinated with his Seattle team, preparing for the dawn raid on Helix headquarters. Tom and his deputies maintained security, though everyone in the building knew that if Helix sent a serious force, 3 small-town cops wouldn't be able to hold them off. Jack found himself in the strange position of being simultaneously essential and useless. He couldn't help with the technical work, didn't have law enforcement authority, and wasn't trained for protective detail. But every time Emily started to look overwhelmed, every time her hands started shaking again, she'd look over at him and he'd nod reassuringly. Just being there mattered. Being a steady presence in the chaos. Around 7 p.m., Tom's secretary brought in pizza from the local shop. They ate mechanically, fuel rather than enjoyment, while cable news played on the television mounted in the corner of Tom's office. Every channel was covering the story. CNN had brought in a pharmaceutical industry expert who was examining the limited documentation Emily had released during the press conference. Fox News was running a split screen, Emily's press conference on one side, Helix Biosynthetics CEO giving an emergency statement on the other. MSNBC was already calling it potentially the biggest pharmaceutical fraud since Purdue Pharma and OxyContin. The CEO of Helix, a silver-haired man named Gregory Hartman, spoke with the practiced ease of someone who'd spent decades managing crises. Ms. Graves was a valued employee until her behavior became increasingly erratic. We have documentation showing she was receiving mental health treatment and was ultimately terminated after violating multiple company policies. These allegations are nothing more than the vindictive fantasies of a disturbed individual seeking attention. Jack felt Emily flinch beside him. I was never in treatment. I never violated any policies. He's just making things up. That's what he does, Diana said, not looking up from her laptop. He's trying to plant doubt, but once we release the full documentation, his lies will fall apart. People can claim you're mentally unstable all they want, but they can't fake 47 death certificates and hundreds of internal company memos. The news coverage shifted to aerial footage of Jack's cabin, or what was left of it. Just a smoking foundation and scorched trees. The local fire chief was giving a statement about the explosion, carefully avoiding any mention of deliberate destruction while his body language screamed arson. That was your home, Emily said softly, staring at the screen. God, Jack, your whole life was in that cabin. Things, Jack said, though his chest felt tight. Just things. I've got photos of Sophie backed up online. Everything else can be replaced. Can it? Can you really replace 12 years of memories? The place where you raised your daughter? Jack thought about that. About Sophie's growth chart marked on the kitchen door frame, showing how she'd grown from a chubby toddler to a gangly 7-year-old. About the handprint paintings she'd made in preschool, proudly displayed on the refrigerator. About the porch swing where they'd sat together on summer evenings, watching the sun set through the pines while she told him about her day. No, he admitted quietly, I can't replace those things. But I can make sure Sophie doesn't grow up in a world where corporations can murder people with impunity. That's worth more than a cabin. Emily's eyes filled with tears. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry for dragging you into this. You didn't drag me anywhere. I walked in with my eyes open. Jack reached over and squeezed her hand. And I meant what I said at the press conference. I'd do it again. Chen's phone rang again. It had been ringing constantly for hours. This time, his expression shifted from grim to surprised. Yes, sir. I understand. When? Tomorrow morning? Sir, I'm not sure that's... Yes. Yes, sir. I'll make it happen. He hung up and looked at everyone in the room. That was the deputy director. This has officially become a priority case. He's pulling in resources from 3 field offices, and he wants to meet with Emily personally, tomorrow morning in Seattle. Is that normal? Tom asked. No, extremely not normal. Deputy directors don't usually get personally involved in field cases, no matter how high profile. But apparently this one has caught the attention of some very important people in Washington. The FDA commissioner has already called the director. There are senators asking questions. This is bigger than I thought. Because Synthorol is that close to approval, Emily explained. The drug was supposed to hit the market next quarter. Helix has already invested over $1 billion in manufacturing capacity and marketing campaigns. If the FDA blocks approval, the company could collapse entirely. We're talking about thousands of jobs, investor lawsuits, a potential market panic in the pharmaceutical sector. So we're not just fighting Helix, Jack said slowly. We're fighting everyone who has a financial stake in this drug succeeding. Every investor, every supplier, every politician who took campaign contributions from them. Now you're getting it, Chen said. This isn't just a criminal case. It's political, economic, and social all at once, which is why we need to be extremely careful from here on out. Emily, the deputy director wants you in protective custody tonight. We've got a safe house in Seattle, high security, limited access. Jack can come with you if you want, but it means leaving town now. Emily looked at Jack, uncertainty written across her face. What do you think? I think we don't have much choice. The press conference bought us visibility, but it also painted targets on both our backs. If we're going to finish this, we need to be somewhere defensible. Then let's go, Emily said. Let's end this. The drive to Seattle took 3 hours, though it felt like 10. They traveled in a convoy, Chen's sedan in front, a protective detail SUV behind them, and Tom Morrison following in his patrol car because he'd be damned if he was going to let his witness get snatched on the way to federal custody. Jack sat in the back seat with Emily, watching the dark forest give way to highway lights as they descended from the mountains toward the city. Emily dozed fitfully, her head resting against the window. Every few minutes she'd jerk awake, disoriented and afraid, until she saw Jack beside her and relaxed again. The trauma of the last few days was catching up with her, the adrenaline finally wearing off to reveal the exhaustion beneath. Jack's mind wouldn't stop racing. He thought about Sophie, safe in Spokane with people she trusted. He thought about his cabin, reduced to ashes. He thought about the 47 people who'd died in Synthoral's clinical trials, and all the people who might have died if Emily hadn't been brave enough to speak up. He thought about the men who'd tied her to a tree, who'd shot at them, who'd destroyed his home. And he thought about what came next. Because this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The press conference had been the opening salvo, but the real battle was just beginning. Helix Biosynthetics had billions of dollars and an army of lawyers. They had political connections and media savvy. They had everything except what Emily had, the truth. The question was whether the truth would be enough. They arrived at the safe house just after midnight. It was an upscale condo in a secured building in downtown Seattle, the kind of place that required key cards and had cameras monitoring every entrance. Chen led them through a series of security checkpoints while the protective detail swept the unit to ensure it was clean. 2 bedrooms, full kitchen, secure communications, Chen explained as they entered. There's a panic button in each room that goes directly to the protective detail stationed in the lobby. Windows are bulletproof. We've got eyes on every entrance and exit to the building. You're as safe here as you can be anywhere. Emily looked around the sterile, expensive space and laughed bitterly. It's like a really nice prison. It's temporary, Chen assured her. Once we complete the raid tomorrow and arrest the key players at Helix, the threat level should decrease significantly. Should, Emily repeated. That's not exactly reassuring. I can't promise you perfect safety, Ms. Graves. I can only promise we're doing everything in our power to protect you. Chen handed her a smartphone. Encrypted. My number's programmed in along with the protective detail. You need anything, you call. And get some sleep. Tomorrow's going to be a long day. After Chen left, Jack and Emily stood in the center of the expensive living room, both of them too wired to even think about sleep despite their exhaustion. Surreal, isn't it? Emily said quietly. 48 hours ago, I was tied to a tree waiting to die. Now I'm in a luxury condo with armed guards outside my door, about to bring down a billion-dollar company. You're doing the right thing. Am I? Sometimes I wonder if it would have been better to just let it go. Take the hint. Disappear and let someone else fight this battle. Jack turned to face her fully. You want to know what I learned in Afghanistan? What kept me going through 3 tours in hell? Emily nodded. That evil doesn't need grand plans or complicated motivations. It just needs good people to convince themselves that standing up isn't worth the cost. Every atrocity I witnessed, every civilian caught in crossfire, every child orphaned by violence, it all happened because somewhere along the line, someone decided their own safety mattered more than doing what was right. So no, Emily, you couldn't have just let it go, because you're not the kind of person who can live with that choice. Tears streamed down Emily's face. Those 47 people, I keep thinking about them, about their families, about how they trusted that the drug being tested on them was safe, and it wasn't, and now they're dead. And if I'd been braver sooner, if I'd gone public the moment I found the discrepancies instead of trying to work through proper channels. Stop, Jack interrupted gently. You can't torture yourself with what-ifs. You did what you thought was right at every step. You tried to report it internally. You documented everything. You made copies before they could destroy the evidence. You did everything a reasonable person could do. But people died while I was being reasonable. And more people would have died if you'd done nothing at all. You can't save everyone, Emily. You can only save the ones you can save. And because of you, thousands of people won't take a drug that could kill them. That has to count for something. Emily wiped her eyes. How did you get so wise? I'm not wise. I'm just old enough to have made enough mistakes to learn from them. Jack looked around the condo. You should try to get some sleep. I'll take the couch out here. No, Jack, please. I know it's stupid and irrational, but I don't want to be alone. Can you just Can you stay in the same room? You can have the bed. I'll take the couch or the floor or whatever. I just need to know someone's there. Jack understood. After trauma, after violence, after having your sense of safety stripped away, sometimes you just needed another human presence, someone to remind you that you weren't alone in the dark. I'll take the couch in the bedroom, he offered. You take the bed. We'll leave the door open so you can see the living room. If you need anything, just call out. Emily nodded gratefully. They prepared for bed in exhausted silence, both of them too tired to do more than wash their faces and change into the spare clothes that had been left in the condo. Jack settled onto the bedroom couch with a blanket while Emily climbed into the bed, still fully dressed except for her shoes. Jack? She said into the darkness. Yeah? Thank you for everything, for saving me, for believing me, for standing with me when you had every reason to walk away. You don't have to thank me. I do. Because most people would have walked away. Most people would have decided I wasn't worth the cost. But you didn't. And I need you to know that whatever happens tomorrow, whatever comes next, you changed my life. You gave me my life back. Jack didn't know what to say to that. So he just said, "Get some sleep, Emily. We've got a war to win tomorrow." She laughed softly in the darkness. A war? Yeah, I guess that's what this is. Within minutes, her breathing had evened out into sleep. Jack lay on the couch, staring at the ceiling, listening to the city sounds filtering through the bulletproof windows. Somewhere out there, in a gleaming corporate tower, executives at Helix Biosynthetics were probably having emergency meetings, strategizing how to destroy Emily's credibility and bury the evidence she'd collected. Somewhere, lawyers were drafting motions and countersuits. Somewhere, the people who'd tried to kill Emily were regrouping, planning their next move. But here, in this moment, in this secure condo with federal agents standing watch, they were safe. Emily was alive. The truth was out in the world, spreading like wildfire through news reports and social media. And tomorrow, when the FBI raided Helix headquarters, when they seized all those carefully hidden documents and interviewed all those complicit employees, the truth would become impossible to deny. Jack thought about Sophie, probably asleep now in Spokane, safe and unaware of how much her father's life had changed in the past 2 days. He hoped she'd understand someday, hoped she'd be proud that when her father had found someone in trouble, he'd chosen to help rather than look away. His phone buzzed softly. A text from Tom Morrison. Made it back to the station. Whole town's talking. You're either a hero or an idiot, depending on who you ask. My money's on hero. Stay safe, Jack. Jack smiled and typed back. Thanks for everything, Tom. Keep an eye on things up there. This isn't over yet. Tom's response came immediately. I know, that's what worries me. Watch your six. Jack set the phone aside and closed his eyes. Sleep came eventually, fitful and filled with dreams of burning cabins and faceless men in dark suits. But even in his dreams, he stood his ground. Even in his dreams, he didn't walk away. Because some things were worth fighting for. Some people were worth protecting. And some truths were too important to stay buried no matter the cost. Tomorrow, the real battle would begin. But tonight, for just a few hours, they could rest. They could breathe. They could remember what it felt like to be safe. And in the morning, they would fight. Dawn broke over Seattle with the kind of gray, misty light that made the city feel like it existed in a perpetual state of half-waking. Jack had been up for an hour already, standing at the bulletproof window with a cup of coffee, watching the streets below slowly come to life. Somewhere across the city, FBI agents were preparing to raid Helix Biosynthetics. Somewhere, lawyers were drafting emergency injunctions. Somewhere, the machinery of justice was grinding into motion. Emily emerged from the bedroom looking more rested than she had in days, though the shadows under her eyes told their own story. She'd changed into fresh clothes from the selection that had been provided, dark jeans and a simple gray sweater that made her look both professional and approachable. "Morning," she said softly, joining him at the window. "How long have you been up?" "A while. Couldn't sleep." Jack handed her his coffee cup. "Made a fresh pot in the kitchen." Emily took a sip and made a face. "You make terrible coffee." Sophie tells me the same thing at least twice a week. The mention of his daughter made Jack's chest tighten. He pulled out his phone and checked for messages. Nothing new from Mary Henderson, which was probably good. It meant Sophie was safe and settled and not asking too many questions about why Daddy hadn't come to get her yet. "You miss her," Emily observed. "Every second, but this is the right call, keeping her away from all this. When this is over, when it's safe, you'll make sure she knows how brave her father was, right? You'll make sure she understands." Jack turned to look at Emily. "When this is over, I'm going to take Sophie camping in the mountains for a week. We're going to roast marshmallows and tell stupid stories and not think about any of this for a while. She doesn't need to know how brave I was. She just needs to know her dad came home." Emily smiled sadly. "You're a good father, Jack Merrick." "I'm trying to be." They made breakfast together, scrambled eggs and toast, simple and filling, while morning news shows played on the television. The coverage of Emily's revelations had exploded overnight. Every major network was running stories. Medical experts were being interviewed about the implications of falsified clinical trial data. Former FDA officials were calling for immediate investigations. Stock analysts were predicting Helix Biosynthetics' market value would plummet when the markets opened. And at the center of it all was Emily's face, frozen in that moment during the press conference when she'd said 47 people died. That image had become iconic overnight, shared millions of times across social media with hashtags like "Justice for Synthorol Victims" and "Big Pharma Kills." "It's working," Emily said, watching herself on television. "People are listening. They're angry." "Good. Anger is useful. Anger makes people demand accountability." Jack's phone buzzed with an incoming call from Agent Chen. He put it on speaker. "Chen, what's the status?" "We're moving on Helix in 30 minutes. I've got teams positioned at their headquarters, their manufacturing facility in Tacoma, and the homes of their 3 top executives. Simultaneous raids across all locations. By 8 a.m., we'll have everything: computers, files, financial records, the works." "What about pushback? Legal challenges?" "Already happening. Their lawyers filed an emergency motion last night trying to block us, but the judge denied it. We've got solid probable cause thanks to Emily's documentation. The warrant is airtight." Emily leaned closer to the phone. "Agent Chen, what happens to the employees, the regular people who work there and didn't know about the fraud?" "They'll be interviewed. Most will be cleared. We're looking for the decision makers, the people who knew what was happening and chose to hide it. Scientists who falsified data, executives who ordered the cover-up, compliance officers who looked the other way. Those are the people who'll face charges." "How many are we talking about?" Chen paused. "Honestly, could be anywhere from 5 to 50 people. Maybe more. This kind of systematic fraud doesn't happen without a lot of people being complicit, either actively or through willful ignorance." Jack thought about that. 50 people whose lives would be destroyed, careers ended, reputations ruined, potentially decades in prison. And yet those 50 people had participated in decisions that killed 47 others and would have killed thousands more if Emily hadn't spoken up. The math was simple and brutal. "Do what you need to do," Emily said quietly. "I'll testify against every single one of them if that's what it takes." "We're counting on that. Speaking of which, the deputy director wants to meet with you this afternoon, 2 p.m. at the Seattle field office. Can you be there?" "We'll be there," Jack confirmed. After Chen hung up, Emily turned to Jack with worry etched across her face. "The deputy director? That's high up the chain. Why would he want to meet with me personally?" "Because you're the star witness in what's about to become one of the biggest corporate fraud cases in history. Because your testimony is going to make or break this prosecution. And because they need to assess whether you can handle the pressure of what's coming." "What is coming?" Jack set down his coffee cup. "Months of depositions, grand jury testimony, eventually a trial that'll be televised on every network, defense attorneys who will try to tear you apart on the stand, media scrutiny of every aspect of your life. Emily, this is going to get uglier before it gets better. You need to be prepared for that." "I know. I've been thinking about nothing else all night, about what happens when they start digging into my past, looking for anything they can use to discredit me. And the thing is, Jack, I'm not perfect. I made mistakes at Helix. I dated a coworker once, and it ended badly. I had a DUI when I was 23. I've been in therapy on and off for anxiety. All of that is going to come out, and they're going to use it to paint me as unstable or vindictive or incompetent. Probably, Jack agreed. But here's what they can't change: the documentation, the death certificates, the internal memos, the financial records showing Helix knew about the problems and hid them anyway. Your personal history might muddy the waters, but it can't change the facts. And juries understand that whistleblowers aren't perfect people. They're just people who found the courage to speak up. Emily nodded, but Jack could see the fear still there. This wasn't the immediate, visceral terror of being tied to a tree or shot at. This was the long, grinding anxiety of knowing you'd volunteered for public crucifixion and there was no backing out. The morning crept by in tense waiting. They watched the news coverage, watched as reporters staked out Helix headquarters waiting for the raid. At exactly 8 a.m., federal agents and FBI windbreakers swarmed the building. Employees were evacuated while agents carrying boxes of evidence streamed out like worker ants. The CEO, Gregory Hartman, was led out in handcuffs, a perp walk clearly designed to send a message. This wasn't a white-collar investigation that would end in quiet settlements. This was serious. Emily watched Hartman being loaded into a federal vehicle, her expression unreadable. I used to see him in the cafeteria sometimes. He'd stop and chat with employees, ask about their kids, act like he cared, and the whole time he knew. He knew people were dying. People are good at compartmentalizing, Jack said. They tell themselves stories to justify what they do. He probably convinced himself it was worth it, that the potential benefits of Synthorol outweighed the costs, that the deaths were acceptable losses in service of a greater good. That's how it always works, isn't it? The people who do the most damage are the ones who believe they're actually heroes. Jack didn't have an answer for that. He'd seen too much in Afghanistan to believe that evil always came with mustache-twirling villains. Some of the worst atrocities he'd witnessed had been committed by people who genuinely believed they were protecting their homes, their families, their way of life. Ideology and self-deception could turn ordinary people into monsters. At noon, a protective detail agent named Rebecca Park came to escort them to the FBI field office. She was young, Korean-American, with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor that reminded Jack of the best soldiers he'd served with. "We're taking 2 vehicles," she explained. "Ms. Graves in one, Mr. Merrick in the other. Different routes. Standard protective protocol when the threat level is high." "Wait," Emily said immediately. "No, we stay together." "Ms. Graves, the protocol exists for a reason. If one vehicle is compromised—" "I don't care about protocol," Emily interrupted, her voice rising. "Jack stays with me. That's not negotiable." Rebecca looked at Jack, who shrugged. "I'm not leaving her. If that breaks protocol, adjust the protocol." The agent sighed but pulled out her radio. After a brief conversation with her supervisor, she nodded. "Fine. You travel together. But if anything happens, you both do exactly what I say without argument. Understood?" "Understood," Emily agreed. The drive to the FBI field office took 40 minutes through midday Seattle traffic. Jack sat in the back seat with Emily, watching the city pass by while Rebecca drove with one hand on the wheel and her eyes constantly checking mirrors. A second vehicle followed 20 feet behind, another protective detail agent providing overwatch. "This is real," Emily said quietly. "Like really real. Federal agents, armed protection, raids, and arrests. A few days ago, I was just a data analyst trying to do the right thing. Now I'm at the center of a federal investigation that's going to bring down an entire company." "How does that feel?" Emily thought about it. Terrifying, empowering, surreal, all of it at once. But mostly I keep thinking about the families, the people who lost someone in those clinical trials. What must they be feeling right now, watching the news and realizing their loved one died so a company could hit quarterly earnings targets? They're probably feeling what you felt when you first discovered the fraud. Angry, betrayed, desperate for justice. I hope they get it. I hope this isn't all for nothing. They arrived at the FBI field office, a modern glass and steel building in downtown Seattle that looked more like a tech startup than a law enforcement facility. Security was intense. They passed through 3 separate checkpoints, each requiring ID verification and metal detectors. By the time they reached the deputy director's office on the 14th floor, Jack felt like they'd infiltrated a military installation. Deputy Director William Castellano was in his early 60s, with silver hair, and the kind of weathered face that came from decades of dealing with the worst crimes humanity could devise. His office was sparse but professional, with framed commendations on the walls and a view of Puget Sound that probably cost more in real estate than most people made in a year. "Ms. Graves, Mr. Merrick, please sit down." Castellano's voice was gravelly, but not unkind. He gestured to chairs across from his massive desk. "I'll get right to the point. This morning's raids were successful. We've seized over 15,000 documents, 800 hours of video footage from security cameras, and digital records from 73 separate computers and servers. Based on preliminary review, Ms. Graves, your documentation was not only accurate, but actually understated the scope of the fraud." Emily's eyes widened. "Understated? How is that possible? I documented 47 deaths. We found evidence of 63 deaths that were clearly related to Synthorol but were either unreported or misclassified. Additionally, we found communication indicating that Helix knew about the problems with the drug as early as Phase 2 trials but chose to proceed anyway. This isn't just fraud, Ms. Graves. This is premeditated corporate manslaughter on a scale we haven't seen since the opioid crisis." Jack felt Emily's hand find his under the conference table. She squeezed so hard his fingers went numb, but he didn't pull away. 63 people, Emily whispered. "Oh my God, 63. "Which is why we're moving forward with maximum aggression," Castellano continued. "We arrested 14 Helix executives this morning, including the CEO, COO, and head of research and development. We're preparing indictments for at least 30 more employees. The FDA has issued an emergency stop work order on all Synthorol-related activities, and we're coordinating with the SEC to investigate securities fraud. Helix has been lying to investors for at least 18 months about the drug's safety profile." "What does that mean for Emily?" Jack asked. "For her safety." "It means the immediate threat should be significantly reduced. With the top executives in custody and the company's operations frozen, they don't have the resources or organization to continue targeting Ms. Graves. However, I want to be clear, there are still risks. Helix has billions in assets. Some of that money might find its way to people willing to silence our star witness. So we're maintaining protective custody for the foreseeable future." Emily leaned forward. "How long is foreseeable?" "Minimum of 3 months. Potentially longer depending on how the investigation develops and when we get to trial. I know that's not what you want to hear, but Ms. Graves, your testimony is the linchpin of this entire case. Without you, we have documents that could be challenged as stolen or fabricated. With you, we have a credible witness who can explain the evidence, contextualize it, and connect the dots for a jury. You're irreplaceable." "What about my life, my job, my family?" "Your job is gone. Helix terminated you, remember?" Castellano's expression softened slightly. "Your family can visit you in protective custody under supervision. As for your life, that's complicated. When this goes to trial, assuming it goes to trial and doesn't end in plea deals, you'll be testifying in open court. Your face will be on every news channel again. After that, rebuilding any sense of normalcy will be difficult." "Witness protection?" Emily asked, her voice small. "That's an option we can discuss. New identity, relocation, the full program. But Ms. Graves, I have to be honest with you. People who enter witness protection give up everything. Their names, their history, their connections to everyone they've ever known. It's not a decision to make lightly." Emily sat back in her chair, looking dazed. "So my choices are to live in hiding for the rest of my life, or live in fear for the rest of my life. Those are my options for doing the right thing." "I wish I could tell you different," Castellano said. "But this is the reality of being a whistleblower in a case of this magnitude. The people you're exposing don't just lose money or reputation. They lose everything, and some of them will never forgive you for that, no matter how justified your actions were." Jack spoke up. "What about the families, the people who lost loved ones in the trials? Will they get justice?" "They'll get the opportunity for justice, which is the best we can offer. We're reaching out to the families now, informing them that their loved ones' deaths are part of a federal investigation. Many of them will likely file civil suits against Helix for wrongful death. Between the criminal prosecutions and the civil litigation, Helix Biosynthetics will probably cease to exist within a year." "Good," Emily said firmly. "They deserve to cease existing." Castellano nodded approvingly. I'm glad you feel that way, Ms. Graves, because we're going to need that anger in the months ahead. Defense attorneys are going to try to break you. They're going to attack your character, your motives, your mental state. They're going to paint you as a thief who stole proprietary data and fabricated allegations for revenge. Are you prepared for that? I don't know if anyone can really be prepared for that, Emily admitted. But I'm not backing down. Those 63 people deserve better than to have their deaths swept under the rug because it was inconvenient for corporate profits. If I have to sacrifice my privacy and my peace of mind to make sure they get justice, then that's what I'll do. Then we'll support you every step of the way. Castellano stood, extending his hand. Ms. Graves, what you've done takes extraordinary courage. Most people in your position would have looked the other way. The fact that you didn't, that you risked everything to expose the truth, that matters. It matters more than you might realize. Emily shook his hand, tears glistening in her eyes. I just hope it's enough. It will be. I promise you that. They left the deputy director's office and were led to a conference room where Agent Chen and his team had set up a command center. Whiteboards covered in names and connections dominated one wall. Evidence boxes were stacked in the corners. A half-dozen agents were working at laptops, building the case that would eventually be presented to a grand jury. Chen looked up as they entered. How'd the meeting go? Intense, Emily said, but good. He told us about the additional deaths you found. Yeah, and that's probably not all of them. We're still going through the records, but every time we dig deeper, we find more evidence of systemic fraud. This company was rotten from the top down. Chen gestured to a chair. We need to get your formal statement, Emily. Everything from when you first noticed the discrepancies to this morning. Every detail, no matter how small. The interview took 6 hours. 2 agents asked questions while a stenographer recorded every word. Emily walked them through her discovery of the data irregularities, her attempts to report the problems internally, the escalating threats, and finally, her decision to flee. She explained the technical aspects of how clinical trial data could be manipulated, provided names of everyone at Helix who would have had knowledge of the fraud, and authenticated document after document from her encrypted files. Jack sat in the corner, ostensibly there for moral support, but really just witnessing the slow, methodical process of building a federal case. This was nothing like the movies made it seem. There were no dramatic revelations or shocking twists, just hour after hour of careful, detailed testimony that established a timeline, created a narrative, and built an unassailable foundation of evidence. By the time they finished, it was after 8 p.m. Emily looked exhausted, but also lighter somehow, as if telling the story to official investigators had lifted some of the weight she'd been carrying. That's enough for today, Chen said, closing his laptop. We'll need more sessions like this over the coming weeks. But you did great, Emily. Really great. What happens now? Emily asked. Now we build the case. We interview Helix employees, analyze the seized documents, coordinate with the FDA and SEC. In about 2 weeks, we'll present evidence to a grand jury and get indictments. Then the real legal battle begins. Motions, hearings, possibly a trial if they don't take plea deals. And me? What do I do? You wait. You rest. You prepare yourself for what's coming. I know it's anticlimactic after everything you've been through, but this is going to be a marathon, not a sprint. Rebecca drove them back to the safe house through evening traffic. The city lights reflected off Puget Sound, making Seattle look almost magical in the darkness. Emily stared out the window silently, lost in thought. Back at the condo, Jack made dinner while Emily sat at the kitchen counter, nursing a glass of wine that had been provided with the safe house amenities. 63 people, she said quietly. I keep thinking about them, about their families. Do you think they blame me for not speaking up sooner? Jack looked up from the pasta he was stirring. I think they're grateful someone finally did speak up. Emily, you can torture yourself with should-haves and what-ifs, but it won't change anything. You did what you could when you could. That's all anyone can ask. Is it enough, though? Will justice for 63 dead people really make up for the fact that they're dead? No, nothing can make up for that. But it might prevent 63 more deaths, or 600, or 6,000, and that has to mean something. Emily took a long sip of wine. When this is over, if it's ever really over, I don't know what I'm going to do. I can't go back to pharmaceutical research. I can't trust that industry anymore, but it's all I know. It's been my entire career. Then you'll figure out something new. People reinvent themselves all the time. Have you reinvented yourself? Jack thought about that. Yeah, I was a soldier, then I was a husband, then I was a single father and a forest ranger. Each time felt impossible at first, but humans are adaptable. We figure things out because we have to. What about after this? After the trial and everything? What will you do? Rebuild my cabin. Try to give Sophie some semblance of normal life. Maybe take a vacation somewhere that doesn't have trees. Jack smiled slightly. And maybe check in on a certain whistleblower from time to time. Make sure she's doing okay. Emily's eyes filled with tears. You don't have to do that. You've already done more than anyone could expect. I know I don't have to, but I want to. Emily, you're not alone in this. I meant what I said at the beginning. We're in this together. She stood and crossed the kitchen, wrapping Jack in a tight hug. He held her while she cried quietly against his shoulder, releasing days of accumulated fear and stress and exhaustion. When she finally pulled away, her eyes were red but clearer. Thank you, she whispered. For everything, for saving my life, for believing in me, for standing with me when everyone else would have run away. You don't have to keep thanking me. Yes, I do, because what you did, what you're still doing, it restored my faith in people. When those men tied me to that tree, I thought that was it. I thought humanity was just cruelty and greed and selfishness. But then you found me. You risked everything to help me. And you reminded me that there are still good people in the world. They ate dinner together in comfortable silence, both of them too emotionally drained for much conversation. Afterward, they watched the evening news, which was still dominated by coverage of the Helix raids. Legal experts were predicting the trials would last months. Medical ethicists were calling for reform of the entire clinical trial process. Politicians were promising investigations and new regulations, and in the center of it all was Emily's face from the press conference, that moment of defiant courage that had already become iconic. That's going to follow me forever, Emily said, looking at her own image on the screen. 20 years from now, people will still remember me as the Helix whistleblower. Would you rather they forgot? She considered. No, I guess not. If my face has to be attached to something, better it be exposing corporate fraud than, I don't know, a humiliating viral video or something. Jack laughed. That's the spirit. When life gives you unwanted fame, at least make it meaningful. They talked late into the night, the conversation meandering through topics both heavy and light. Emily told stories about her childhood in Oregon, about her sister and nephew, about her dreams of someday teaching at a university. Jack told her about Afghanistan, about the friends he'd lost and the ones who'd made it home broken, about watching Sophie take her first steps, say her first words, grow from a helpless infant into a fierce, curious little person who made him laugh every day. Around midnight, exhaustion finally caught up with them. They retreated to their respective sleeping arrangements, but Jack noticed Emily left both bedroom doors open, hers and his, still needing the reassurance that she wasn't alone in the darkness. The next 3 weeks fell into a strange routine. Emily spent hours in FBI interviews, providing detail after detail about Helix's operations. Jack accompanied her to every session, a steady presence that agents learned to work around. In the evenings, they'd return to the safe house and try to create some semblance of normalcy, cooking meals, watching movies, talking about everything except the case. Sophie called every few days, and those conversations were both the best and worst parts of Jack's week. She missed him terribly, but was having fun in Spokane with Mary Henderson's granddaughter. She didn't understand why Daddy couldn't come get her yet, why she couldn't go back to school, why everything had changed. Jack did his best to explain without scaring her, telling her that Daddy was helping a friend and needed to stay in Seattle for a little while longer. Will you be home for my birthday? Sophie asked during one call. Her 8th birthday was 6 weeks away. I'll do everything I can to be there, sweetheart, Jack promised, though he had no idea if he could keep that promise. Daddy, I saw you on TV. Mrs. Henderson tried to turn it off, but I saw you. You were at that place with the cameras and everyone was asking questions. Are you famous now? Jack smiled despite the ache in his chest. No, baby girl. I'm not famous. I just helped someone who needed it, and people wanted to hear about it. Like a superhero? No, Sophie. Just like a regular person doing the right thing. That's what superheroes are, Daddy. Regular people who do the right thing when it's hard. Jack had to blink back tears. When did you get so wise? I'm almost 8. I'm very mature for my age. The grand jury convened 3 weeks after the raids, and within 2 days they returned indictments against 32 Helix employees on charges ranging from conspiracy to commit fraud to criminally negligent homicide. The CEO, Gregory Hartman, was charged with 17 counts of second-degree murder. The head of research was charged with falsifying federal documents. The entire executive team was charged with securities fraud. Emily watched the news coverage of the indictments with grim satisfaction. It's really happening. They're actually going to face consequences. Did you doubt it? Jack asked. Part of me did. Part of me kept waiting for some loophole, some technicality that would let them walk away. Rich people always seem to find a way to escape accountability. Not this time. The evidence is too strong, the public outcry too loud. These people are going down, Emily. You made sure of that. 2 days after the indictments, Emily received a letter. It came through the FBI, forwarded from her old address, and had been opened and screened for threats before being delivered to her. The return address said, Margaret Chen, Seattle, WA. Emily stared at the envelope for a long time before opening it. What is it? Jack asked. I don't know anyone named Margaret Chen. Emily carefully extracted a single handwritten page. As she read, her face crumpled. Oh God, oh my God. Emily, what's wrong? She handed him the letter with shaking hands. Jack read, Dear Ms. Graves, my name is Margaret Chen. You don't know me, but my husband Daniel was participant 7743 in the Synthorol clinical trial. He died 8 months ago from what the doctors called sudden cardiac arrest. He was only 46 years old, healthy except for the chronic back pain that led him to volunteer for the trial. They told me his death was unrelated to the drug. They told me it was just one of those terrible things that happen. I saw your press conference. I saw you talk about the 47 deaths that Helix hid. And I know now that Daniel was one of them. That he didn't just die. He was killed. By people who knew their drug was dangerous and gave it to him anyway. I'm writing to tell you thank you. Thank you for being brave enough to speak up. Thank you for making sure Daniel's death wasn't for nothing. Thank you for making sure no other wife has to get that phone call, has to watch her husband taken off life support, has to explain to her children why daddy isn't coming home. Because of you, I know the truth. And because of you, the people who killed my husband are going to face justice. Whatever they say about you, whatever lies they tell to destroy your credibility. I want you to know that you're a hero to me. You're a hero to every family who lost someone. And you're the kind of person my Daniel would have admired. Thank you for giving me answers. Thank you for giving me closure. Thank you for caring enough to risk everything. With profound gratitude, Margaret Chen Emily was sobbing now, deep, wrenching cries that shook her whole body. Jack held her, letting her release the emotion she'd been holding back for weeks. She thanked me, Emily gasped. I was so afraid they'd hate me for not speaking up sooner, and she thanked me. Because you gave her truth. Because you made sure her husband's death mattered. That's everything, Emily. Over the next few days, more letters arrived. Families of clinical trial participants, thanking Emily for her courage, offering support, sharing stories of their loved ones, who they were, what they loved, how much they were missed. Each letter was both heartbreaking and healing, a reminder of why Emily had risked everything. She kept them all in a box that the FBI had provided, reading them when the weight of what was coming felt too heavy to bear. 6 weeks after the raids, the defense attorneys for Helix executives began their counteroffensive. They filed motions to suppress Emily's documentation, claiming it was obtained illegally. They demanded psychiatric evaluations of Emily, suggesting she was mentally unstable. They tried to get the trial moved to a different jurisdiction, claiming the media coverage had made a fair trial impossible. Every motion was denied, but each one took a toll. Emily spent hours with prosecutors, preparing responses, providing additional context, defending her actions and her mental state. The stress was showing. She wasn't sleeping well, was losing weight, seemed perpetually exhausted. I don't know if I can do this, she admitted to Jack one night. They're tearing apart my entire life, looking for anything they can use against me. Did you know they subpoenaed my high school records, my college transcripts? They found out about the DUI when I was 23 and are trying to paint me as someone with a history of poor judgment. Let them dig, Jack said firmly. All they're going to find is a normal person with a normal past. You made mistakes? Welcome to being human. But nothing they find is going to change the fact that you documented systematic fraud that killed 63 people. The evidence speaks for itself. What if the jury doesn't believe me? What if they decide I'm just a disgruntled employee with an axe to grind? Then the jury will be wrong. But Emily, you can't control what 12 strangers decide. All you can control is whether you tell the truth as clearly and honestly as possible. That's all anyone can ask of you. 8 weeks after the raids, Emily received another letter. This one was from a different kind of source, a current Helix employee who'd been granted immunity in exchange for testimony. Ms. Graves, I worked in the compliance department at Helix. I knew something was wrong with the Synthoral data, but I convinced myself it wasn't my problem. I told myself that smarter people than me had looked at the numbers and signed off. I told myself that speaking up would cost me my job and my career. I was a coward. And because I was a coward, people died. I'm testifying against the executives now, telling prosecutors everything I know. It won't bring back the people who died, and it won't erase my failure to act when I should have. But maybe it will help make sure justice is done. I'm writing to tell you that you did what I should have done. You were brave when I was weak. You risked everything while I hid behind my paycheck and my mortgage and my fear of making waves. Thank you for being better than me. Thank you for showing the rest of us what courage actually looks like. I hope someday I can forgive myself for my cowardice, but I'll never forget your bravery. Emily read the letter twice, then set it carefully in the box with all the others. He called himself a coward, she said softly. But he's testifying now. He's doing the right thing now. Doesn't that count for something? It counts for a lot, Jack agreed. Courage isn't about never being afraid or never making mistakes. It's about doing the right thing even after you've failed before. This person is choosing to be brave now. That matters.